Yeah. We want to welcome everyone out to the Highland City Council meeting. Hold it, Kim was just here.
She's coming. She's getting me something.
Okay. Want to welcome you out. It is 6:07 p.m. on Tuesday, February 20th. We welcome everyone out to our work session tonight. We will start kind of right in. We will have our city council meeting, our regular session at 7 p.m. But at this time, we have a campaign finance code update and our MPMA, our open public meetings training tonight by our city attorney, Rob Patterson.
Okay, thank you, Mayor and City Council. I have slides, but we're figuring them out at the moment. Hey, look at you go. Aaron fixed it as usual. This is our annual Open Public Meetings Act training, and we thought we'd have a little bit extra time, so we also want to discuss campaign finance and disclosure questions, as those had come up within the last election cycle. We're going to begin with Open and Public Meetings training. Several of you have had this before, but we're going to hit on some of the same topics and kind of, as always, feel free to interrupt and ask questions for any clarifications you might have. It's on. There we go. As the background rule, the background policy and rule of state law is that public bodies are required to, quote, take their actions openly and, quote, conduct their deliberations openly. That's the whole intent of the Open Public Meetings Act. To the extent there's a question, I always refer back to those two policy goals. Are we taking actions openly? Are we conducting deliberations openly? This is never a question about how to avoid it. There's times we have discussions offline. That's very reasonable and appropriate. When it comes to deciding the public's business, taking action, it's always do it openly and have those final important discussions openly. So who is subject to a Public Meeting Act? Of course, you all. You are a public body. There's more than two of you. You discuss the public's business. You make decisions. You are funded with tax dollars. All of those things go into making a public body. And anytime you have a quorum, so meaning at least three of you that can vote. So the mayor doesn't count, at least in this instance for forming a quorum. But the rest of you do. Which is why you often can have meetings or discussions where it's two council members and the mayor, because the mayor is a typically non-voting member of the public body. Simple majority, so three, but I'll remind you that under state law, unlike many public bodies, city councils have a special rule where you can't take any action unless you have a majority of all members voting in favor of it, regardless of how many of you show up. So if you have three of you come to a meeting, you have convened a public meeting, you have a quorum, and all three of you have to agree in order to pass anything. If you end up with 2-to-1 splits, things don't pass. So other public bodies, that rule doesn't necessarily apply. To you, it does as a city council. There are exceptions for chance or social gatherings. So you run into each other at a supermarket, you happen to run across each other anywhere else, not an issue. There's no concern with that. There's a little bit of, we'll have a discussion about electronic messages. There's an exception for it, but some limitations on it, but I'm going to tackle that in a little bit here. Any questions right off the bat? Fantastic. Meetings. You're in a meeting right now. Meetings include everything you do essentially as a public body. So work sessions like this count. There's even special rules about when and where you can hold them. By and large, a lot of these things get kind of handled behind the scenes by staff. We have excellent staff, primarily Stephanie, our recorder, who handles a lot of the details of how to run these meetings. By rule, all meetings are open unless you close them. Even when you go to close them, you have to start the meeting open and then you close it. You can never just have a closed meeting. You always have to have an agenda, and we always put those together. We try to do them well in advance on the Thursday before your meeting. Technically, by statute, it's at least 24 hours ahead of the meeting. In emergency situations, you can shorten that down, but you have to provide certain special notices in that case. So I've held meetings with 2 to 3 hours notice for a literal ongoing flood or something where the council had to take some action in order to authorize special funding immediately, that makes complete sense. In those situations, you often try to then convene a meeting with the normal notice to ratify those actions just to make sure we've gone through the right steps. Everything that you decide has to be listed on an agenda. And there gets some question about what do you have to list? This often comes up with like code amendments. People get very concerned about, oh, there's a code amendment. Do we have to post the ordinance in the final form? You know, if we made a change, do we have to hold another meeting and post that? The answer is no. As long as you said, we're discussing this code and these possible amendments, it's presumed that the council can make any changes you want through it. You don't have to do another notice. You always can do more notice, but as the bare minimum, this came up in a zoning case where there was a discussion of a development agreement regarding property in a certain area. Utah Supreme Court said, that's enough notice to inform everyone that there might be a zoning change there. So that's the kind of level of notice we try to always give more. We include our staff reports, our discussions as part of the agenda. We're really kind of on top of everything. But
I have a
yes.
question. So if somebody gives a presentation in which they were given uninterrupted time, does that need to be included on the agenda or no?
No, not necessarily. That would be more about a council policy rule that you could adopt. This is actually to the next item. People can bring up any item they want. So separate for anything on the agenda. If something's not listed on agenda, someone can walk up, and they do all the time during the public comment, and ask questions. And usually you can have some little bit of a discussion, but it always comes back as, okay, that sounds important. We need to put that on a future agenda to take any action. If it's something on an agenda item, really any kind of discussion is permitted related to that. If you want to have more specific rules about how certain presentations or the formality of them, that's more just council internal policies. It's not a state law requirement. As long as the item was discussion of that general topic.
So Rob, just to kind of follow up, there's two things to follow up. One, so if all of a sudden the council brings up an item that was not on the agenda, we can start to discuss it even if it's not. We just can't take any action. Is that correct, or does it need to be down as a discussion item?
So it's actually written in state law as something addressed by the public. So someone walks in and brings up an item, feel free to have some discussion about it, but ultimately it's well, we might want to do something with this. We need to put this on an agenda, have a more full discussion, and potentially take action.
You know, you're saying the public, but what about if a council member in our discussion,
if you
something
say
comes
like,
up?
yes. Generally, you try not to avoid too in-depth discussion on that unless it's listed as a discussion item. That's why we've adopted the policies about making it really easy to add discussion items, because the goal is to make sure we can have those discussions openly. But sometimes something comes up, you'll have a report from, some board or other thing you're involved with saying, hey, this came up. I wanted to get the council's feedback on it. Here's kind of a high-level summary. Could we maybe have this on a discussion later? That's perfectly appropriate. When you get to, if you start reaching the level of, here's an item that came up recently, and I want to have a real in-depth discussion about what the council feels about it, maybe what kind of course of action, it's wait to put that as a discussion item.
Okay. So underneath the discussion item, we can have, we've done this several times. I just want to make sure we can, we discuss it, and when we're getting ready to maybe put it on an agenda for the next meeting to vote, but we're asking, hey, what would you like to see in that motion, or which way would you be leaning? That's okay, because it's not really an official vote, but you are getting a pretty good indication. That doesn't mean they can't change their mind, but you're getting an indication kind of how they want to move forward.
Correct. In fact, we have a discussion item like that on today's agenda regarding some signage. It's more about a high-level discussion. Is this something worth pursuing, or give us some direction, so that as you actually come to the action part, staff is ready to present whatever the council needs to hear. So if you want the discussion, I'd encourage you to put it on as a discussion item.
Okay, now let's go back. Now Kim asked more, and I'm just going to, for better clarification. So we have in our agendas, we're going to have, you're going to have usually staff do a presentation, and this is what we've usually done. So we've had staff do a presentation, and sometimes we've had the public hearing, we've had the developers come up, but usually it's been towards the end. Now sometimes council members are asking questions during the staff presentation or before we have residents come up. But I think, Kim, what your question was about a specific presentation for a council. Is there a specific timing if there's going to be where we're letting a council member do a full-on presentation versus a comment? One of where you're having a presentation, can that be before public hearing? Does it matter? Is there timing? I understand you're saying that we could adopt bodies, but is there an appropriate way to do that?
The appropriate way is whatever the council directs. And this is really, state law does not, says if you're going to take action on an item, put it on an agenda. That's all it requires. In terms of what level of discussion, how that discussion flows, state law says cities, you should adopt your own rules of parliamentary procedure. We often adopt those Robert Rules of Order. We have something like that, but our rules are they even say the council is to encourage informal, free-flowing discussion. As I understand it, that means any council member can raise any topic, idea, or thought or comment they would like. In terms of a formal presentation, it's not much different than having someone who came prepared with, I've seen councils in very different, different cities come with written remarks ready, or sometimes they know a motion's coming up. I had this in a different city where they were arguing about zoning a lot. One council member didn't like it for very good, political reasons. He was just opposed to it, but he came with a written statement. So when he voted no, he could feel like he could cogently express why he was against this thing. So he read it out. And if you want to have it like advance notice of presentations, things, that would be required to be part of our parliamentary procedures, where something more formal should be submitted to the mayor or some other process in advance. Right now, we don't have that. It's just an informal discussion, however the council wants to proceed with it.
So let's assume that during that, if a couple of council members said, hey, I think the timing's off or the presentation, is that something that they could vote on, or is it not let's assume that there's, the mayor's put a presentation together and I'm presenting, they're going, hey, we think the timing's off or we want to move it to a different thing. Can there be a motion by the council saying, hey, I'm going to, or I guess you can also just call for a vote, or you can say, hey.
There's several motions to be made. Ultimately, the council as a majority body decides how your organization, you set up the general rules, and in any specific instance, the council can either move to end discussion, move to call the question. That's happened before. Essentially, you just say, we're done having the discussion. Now, that does require a formal motion, a second, and a vote. But that is if that is the strong feeling of, a majority, that is the option available. Otherwise, if we don't want to handle it in that specific meeting, we should adopt a more general policy that everyone should follow. But that doesn't necessarily restrict us from making a motion during the meeting.
So now this could lead on to, and maybe this isn't maybe the open meetings, but it might be helpful for parliamentary procedures. There's a motion. Someone makes a motion, they get a second. If another person makes an alternate motion and they get a second, we have to vote on the alternate motion before we vote on the first motion, correct?
If you move to amend the prior motion or add to it, that motion has to itself be a motion, get a second, and then there is a vote on the amendment, whether you pass or fail that. If it passes, the original motion is then you hold a vote on it as amended, or as not amended if the amending vote didn't pass. But yes, that motion to amend has to be decided first.
Well, no, but let's assume that you have a motion, I want to do this specific action. I've got a second to do that. Someone else makes a motion, I want to motion that we don't do the action, and they get a second. Which do we vote on?
No.
In that case, you should rule it out of order, the second one.
Yes, because that one's you can't just make a contrary motion.
Okay,
it could
so
be, I want to approve it with condition A, and someone else says, well, I would move to amend condition A to add the following language to it.
Okay.
Then you vote on that motion to amend, see if it passes or not, and then go back. You carry the motion on the first one, and then if it passes, you're done. If it doesn't pass, then you can have a second motion to reject it or
Let's
take
use
some
an
other
example.
action.
So this would be an amendment. We would like to propose that we have 4 alcohol licenses in this area. I would like to propose an amendment, this is now the amendment, to have it be 5. That amendment of 5 would be voted on first before the amendment of 4.
Correct.
That's more than, okay. That's right. Okay. I guess that's,
And if the 5 passes, then you have to go back and hold a vote on the main motion.
oh, you do? If the 5 passes, do you?
So
still have to-
so say someone moved, I adopt all these regulations with 4 licenses. Someone else, and it's seconds, you go into the discussion portion, someone else says, well, then I move to amend that motion to change the number of licenses to 5. Someone seconds it, you have a motion, say it carries. Then you go back to vote on the original motion, which is now everything, but it has 5 licenses in
Okay.
it. You still haven't passed the substance of it, you've changed
So
one
you're
term
only
of
voting
it.
on that one specific amendment?
One specific item.
Okay.
Good.
That's more about parliamentary procedure, not on public meetings, but that is a good process question.
I do think though, when it comes to like formal presentations, because I think there's some big confusion. I remember when Brittany gave a presentation on Viewpoint and Up There, I had to go with her to put it on the agenda. And so there needs to be some consistency there because it was already on the agenda, but she wanted to do a formal presentation on it. And so we were told it was required for us to both have two people to put it on the agenda.
Yes, and that, as I recall, that was a little bit different of a situation because it was an item on the agenda, and the question was more about if something is added. I think it was Brittany and someone else had the 2 votes to put it on the agenda as an action item. It was probably you as well, or I forget who. Great, it's on the agenda. The question then was, staff by default always prepares a staff report with staff's recommendation for or against it. Should staff still do that when it's a council recommended thing? And should the council members who wanted to put it on there also have the chance to add their own recommendation or presentation on top of it? So it's related, but it is a little bit different because this was, that was more about should staff make recommendations when it's a council thing, and should the council members who supported it also get a say in how that gets presented to the public and the council? But I'm happy, we're happy to address council policies. If there's a change that the council wants to make, we can certainly propose some amendments.
We honestly thought this was going to be part 1 of a part 2 discussion. Like part 2 would come back and talk about kind of our procedures and see what amendments council might want to make. Another thing to consider is just, I mean, with all presentations, like what flow do we want? Because I think it was on that item, you're referencing Councilmember Rodella, that a member of the public came and gave us a presentation as well, right? Do we want to allow those? And so I think it's a process question that is not clearly outlined in our procedures right now that if council has an opinion about, we would love to amend those to meet what you would like.
Well, it's not just we've had developers also that want to come do a presentation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so you're going to see a number of different options. So you might have a council member, you might have the public, you might have someone that's on the agenda and it's their item. You know, it's just where is that presentation level we allow?
And I'll add a little comment, but I believe Councilmember Smith has a comment too.
Well, I was just a little bit curious, and I appreciate the discussion and different things. And, hopefully I'm not going to get arrested. But anyhow, aren't we off the agenda right now? Talking about all the policy, and we're talking about previous votes, previous things that happened. We're supposed to be talking about the Open Meetings Act.
Open Public Meetings Act.
Yeah, and
So-
I appreciate all the conversation, but it seems like we're already off the agenda.
Well, we'll return to the agenda and we'll talk about the agenda. So items need to be on an agenda to be discussed and voted on. If we'd like to address policies regarding how we put things on agenda, how we do that discussion, staff would welcome any comments. We're happy to propose anything the council would like.
Thank you.
Can we put that on the agenda for our next meeting, that we have time? Because I have some things to, I have feelings about this pretty strongly. And
Sounds like we
Yes.
want to have a discussion on council policies and rules. We'll add
Yeah.
that to a future agenda as a discussion item.
you have formal presentations and when it's done, before public hearing or after the public hearing. I have really strong feelings about that.
I will also just add this note. This is less, well, you know what? No, we'll just move on to public meetings. What was my next slide? Closed meetings. There are very specific rules for closed meetings. I also handed you a sheet I call it my one-page cheat sheet, but I keep cheating and making the margins bigger in order to keep it on one page, so I'm sorry. But closed meetings, again, like I said, you have to always open in a public meeting. You always have to list that you're going into closed session as a possible agenda. By default, we add that to each agenda and then say, we're not holding it, or we don't see a need for it. That gives us, in case a last-minute thing arises, we can then hold that motion and have that discussion. It requires a supermajority vote to go into closed session. It comes up rarely, but I have seen a motion to go into closed session fail. 2, actually. It's quite awkward. So it technically requires 4 of the 5 to vote in favor of it. The votes to go into closed session have to be recorded by each person, and also the reason to go into closed session. There's very specific reasons allowed in state law to go into a closed session. The most general ones we see are what we call personnel issues, the character, competence, or mental or physical health of an individual. We typically refer to that as personnel. It's actually any individual. Pending or reasonably imminent litigation, and real property purchases or sales. Sales have a little bit extra notice process, but those are the most common ones we'll see. There's a few others, security, criminal investigations, quasi-judicial decisions. They just are much more rare. The only caveat with personnel, the one thing you can't do in a closed session is interview members who are going to be appointed to a council seat. As you saw with our last year's appointment processes, that was all conducted publicly.
The other related point in my recollection is that you can't discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual when that individual is someone who's applied to fill a vacancy.
Yes, so it's any interviews or any discussion of them. The policy behind that is if someone's going to be filling the council seat, they want the discussion of whether that person is qualified to be a council member to be held in the public, because as you all know, you get to make that decision. During a closed session, you can't approve any action. So you can't adopt an ordinance, you can't approve a resolution, make an appointment, do any of those kinds of things. However, as we often do, and as every city and public body does, you often will give discussion and general direction. As long as the item finally comes back to the council for approval, there's no concern with that.
On a super majority, is that a 2/3?
2/3 vote.
So when there's 5.
It's
3 out of
4.
5 is 60, so you need 67, 66, 66. So that's 4 out of 5.
Correct. 4 out of 5 to pass. So we actually have an item on the agenda tonight. That's a bit awkward for me, but there was a discussion in closed session. I believe I wasn't there for it, but there is a final approval coming back on the agenda today. And that's where whatever you talked about in closed session, I don't know about, but also it doesn't necessarily matter. Your final decision is the one you make in the public meeting today. It matters a lot to me, I'll say that. In closed session, you don't need to follow the normal recording rules. You have to record virtually everything except for the personnel issues. You don't have to keep minutes, but you can. And with the personnel issues, the mayor actually signs a certificate, whoever's the presiding officer of the meeting, saying we discussed nothing else except for that topic during this meeting. The reason for this comes to the enforcement, which I'll just touch on it now. All of these records, if someone questions whether an approval was done during closed session or you strayed off topic, they can actually file an action in court and demand that the city give them all records related to it. So that includes our records, any minutes that were taken, and that certificate. And the court will review it in camera, meaning offline, and decide whether you followed the closed meeting rules or not. If we don't, the court is required to then make that public, everything related to it. If we do, then they keep it sealed and nothing happens with it further. All right, electronic communications. So, this is what I mentioned earlier regarding meetings. So electronic communications are not considered a meeting. So you have an electronic meeting, that's where you have one or more members who are not physically present, calling in, videoing in, however we've done that. We have an ordinance that allows for that. Electronic messages are different, and there's actually an exception in the Public Meetings Act that says if you email a quorum, that doesn't count as a meeting. You're fine with that. However, I just remind, there is the standard requirement, background policy of public bodies required to conduct deliberations openly. So I kind of outlined 3 different areas where I saw kind of okay, maybe not okay, and definitely not okay. Okay, messaging other council members or the public outside of the meeting, there's zero concern with that. As long as you're not, approving a contract by email, you're fine. Messaging other council members or the public during a meeting about unrelated topics, so topics that aren't on the agenda, they're not being discussed, I would discourage it. It's not strictly a violation because you're not there to discuss that item. But it's also, it kind of runs against the intent of the Public Meetings Act. The one I do believe does run afoul of the Public Meeting Act if you're messaging other council members or the public during an open meeting about something on the agenda in that meeting. So at that point,
let's assume that there's that you are talking on something, and you have a person in the audience that's texting you up here, and they're saying, "Hey, vote this way," or you're communicating back, "Hey, can you stand up and make a comment to the council a certain way?" That would be breaking the Public Open Meeting Act.
breaking is a really strong word. I don't know I'd call it breaking. It doesn't meet the intent and purpose of it. Whether it's an actual violation, there's virtually little case law about what actually constitutes a violation. But I would recommend against it because the purpose is to discuss these items openly. It's hard to have those deliberations openly if some of it's happening in a private one-on-one conversation through electronic, like a text or an email between either council members or the public. Some part of the discussion that the council is having regarding an item is not being open to the public. And I do think that that kind of runs against the intent and purpose of the Open Publics Meeting Act.
Would I correctly understand, just looking at this, the 52.4.210, that provides a guarantee that as long as that electronic messaging is happening when the public body is not convened in an open meeting, then you know that no one is going to interpret that as any kind of problem. Once you are doing it while in a public meeting, then there's always the risk that someone will interpret that.
That's exactly it. This exception says this is a clear safe harbor. You do this, you're fine. If you're not doing this, so either you are sending messages at a time when the public body is convened in an open meeting, there's nothing that says that is wrong. What it says is we're not guaranteeing that's not a violation of this act. So that's why I kind of gave those 3 points. So, if it's a quick text to, a family member to come get you some drinks during council meeting, that's fine. That's not an issue. If it's a quick, question maybe to staff about, oh, we're having an issue accessing my account, or could you send me that document really quickly so I can talk about it? I think that's on the fine side. When it's someone in the public says to you by text, I think you should raise this issue and talk about it because this is a major concern I'm having, and it's not, and I mean, part of that is we should, we facilitate public hearings at times, but at times when it's not a public hearing, it's those discussions are best held outside of the meeting. So before the meeting, talk to people. After the meeting, talk to people. At any time, talk to people. It's just if you're discussing an agenda item, hold the communication to what the public can see.
Hey, Brittany, I just texted you. I'm just seeing if you'll look at your phone.
Well, but now there's going to be times, and I'll be very open. I get a text saying, hey, did you want to maybe cover this one agenda item? Does it make sense or something that way? And it's not from the public. It's most of the time from staff go, hey, did you forget to include this in?
Sometimes we'll throw up things. Hey, we forgot to add this on there, Mayor. Could you raise this point? I mean, that's more about facilitating the discussion so it actually is a full and complete discussion. I think that's fine.
They're not asking me to ask. They're just saying, hey, were you going to discuss this agenda item? Or
Did you want to open this up to the public? You mentioned that once. You haven't done it yet, Mayor. Would you like to do that still?
I get text saying, you're going to do a public hearing. I have had that.
But generally, if it's about the topic, try to make it as open and public as possible.
So what we should be very careful is if we have, because occasionally, since we have our phones here, we get a text. We should be careful communicating back here. What about, because we have live, we have a live view, we might have someone sitting in their home that's now texting us that aren't here in the public. Is it just, we need to be careful any communication that's...
In some regard, and this has actually happened a couple of times, I think it's fine. There'll be a comment sent, someone can't make it, either they are out of town or they're physically not able to make it to the meeting or call in for like a public hearing, but they want their comments part of it. And they email one council member that's their friend or acquaintance. I think it's fine. But, and as we've done it, is a councilman will say, I received this message from so-and-so, I'm going to read it exactly as they wanted to make sure it's part of the hearing. I think that's totally appropriate. You're making that part of the deliberation.
Well, no, my question was, it's live right now. So
Yeah.
someone's watching us live, and they want to participate, but they're not here to make the... I guess we could say, hey, this person was not able to make it. But
Yes,
if
that's
they're
something
trying
I
to
think...
communicate back and forth to have their voice heard, and they're not here. I guess we'd have to then say, hey, I'm having a communication. This person would like me to ask the following questions, what you're saying.
Yes, if you wanted to bring that in, honestly, you can bring it up publicly. There is a little bit of an issue if it's not a public hearing and you're taking comments from someone and adding their conversation in, and the rest of the public who may or may not be here doesn't have the same chance to participate. It's a little unfair to that person. But if it is a public hearing and someone says, hey, I can't make it, I want to make this comment, I think it's totally appropriate to bring that into the meeting.
Hold on, you just brought up a very good point. We're not having a public meeting, but we have public that sometimes want to communicate. We probably get more communication that way, where we're having a discussion, but they want to chime in, but we're not doing a public hearing.
Nope. And sometimes, Mayor, you'll, in your discretion, because you do run the meeting, you can decide, we'll take a couple comments on this, but sometimes it's, no, this is not a public hearing, it's a public meeting.
Is it
yes.
correct that the bottom line here with regard to, we've talked a lot about getting texts and that any text that we receive is not a violation of.
No,
It
just
would be-
receiving
it
a
would
text
be
is not a violation.
Outbound that would potentially.
Yes, it's more
cause
about
problems.
your communications, your deliberations. So, any other thoughts, questions?
Well, when you say outbound, I guess if we act on a person texting us from the audience to ask a question, is that an issue?
What I would say is you might just want to bring it up as, hey, I received a question just now and it was sent
That's
in.
probably better to cover it that way.
Then it's, honestly, the whole point of it is just to be open about it. It doesn't really dictate how you do it. It's just, if you're open about it, that's what they care about. I kind of touched on this. Any person who believes you didn't follow the notice process right or the agenda process right can challenge this in district court. The state AG and the county district attorney have responsibility to enforce this and to investigate it. We also get audits. Part of our audit that you just did, you get little findings sometimes if you messed up your notice and they happen to catch it. That's happened never at Highland. Stephanie would never allow it.
But we're in closed session, once again, needs to stay to that topic. I guess you talk about open meetings. Occasionally we get done with a city council meeting, or you're coming in early, and there might be 3 or 4 of us, or we have to be careful deliberating because there's 3 of us now that, now other than the mayor, but if there's 3 council members, that's the body. We have to be careful if there's a discussion item going on there.
Right. There's a level of like meeting before or after that's a little bit of that social gathering where you're just, saying, hi, how are you? Talking about your day. That's not a concern. If it's a half hour before, 3 of you sit down and say, okay, we got this item coming up. How's everyone going to vote on it? And start having that discussion before the meeting begins. That's where I get a little
So I have another
worried.
question. Why can the legislators then go,
Because they wrote the rules, they wrote it differently for themselves. That's the short answer.
Okay.
Yes.
So I have a question. When I was first on the council some years ago, 3 city council people attended the planning commission. And we sat in different parts of the room. Nobody talked to each other, but there was a lot of consternation because the feeling was with 3 council people, even though it was announced as a public meeting, it became not a planning commission, but a city council meeting. Now, I don't know, since we didn't make any decisions, we sat in different parts of the room, didn't communicate with one another. I'm not sure how that was, but what's your opinion on that?
I have 2 different opinions on 2 different aspects of that. So as to the meeting part, as long as it's posted as a notice of quorum, it's fine to show up to the planning commission meetings. You've noticed that you could be there, and it's potential if there's a hearing that a council member could stand up and address a topic and kind of have that communication. I've seen all the time where there's combined work sessions or planning commission or a council member, council is very concerned about an upcoming general plan issue or something along that lines. They want to participate in the public hearing. I don't have a concern about that. I always just recommend, at least posting that notice of quorum. That's what I usually do. If there's any chance that 3 of you might be together and something about the city's business might come up. Separate from that issue, I do recommend, this is just a personal recommendation in a sense, but when a planning commission meets, I have found that they like to defer to councils if councils are there, council members and the mayor. And sometimes that's helpful because you can get your input in, but sometimes that robs the council, I think, of a meaningful independent body reviewing the issue. So it's not a legal issue. It's more of, would you like the planning commission to be more independent and give you kind of an unbiased, fresh take on it, separate from your opinion, or would you like them to have your opinion incorporated? And that's a separate concern. So usually I recommend avoiding the planning commission, to leave them make a recommendation, even if you hate the recommendation. Rarely does it matter that the council approves legislative actions. What will change now, because of this new development code update, public hearings on plats, preliminary plats. In that case, I would recommend that if you have a concern, you're a resident of Highland, to come to those public hearings and make your opinion known, because that will be the only time you will actually have the chance to kind of weigh in on that before a decision is made. So in those cases, I do recommend that if you feel there's an issue that you want to speak on, come to those meetings. If you think 3 of you might show up, please give Stephanie a quick notice. It's really easy to put a notice of quorum up, and that just covers our bases.
If you do that, and if you come to a planning commission and want to comment, should you, does it matter if you preface your comment by saying, I'm on the city council versus I'm a resident?
You're welcome to speak in either capacity. It's up to you how you want to present it. It could be as a city council member who has reviewed many plats over the years. I've seen how the R140 subdivision and zoning process works. This is my take on this plat. I think it's great, or I think here's a concern. Or if it's as a resident who's lived here, I think this is not a good idea or a great idea. You're welcome to speak as you'd like. Yes.
So we didn't totally answer my question. So if by chance
Oh,
3 members of the city council show up at a meeting, so we just say one of us just needs to leave, is that what you're saying? If we're at planning?
no, if it's
Commission.
just by chance, that's exactly what the chance meetings are for. And I would recommend, as you explained how you did it, you kind of separate yourselves so
We
it's
didn't
clear you're
talk.
not, sitting in a corner having a discussion. That's fine. That's part of the chance meetings. So I'm not worried about that. My discussion was, if you happen to know that 3 of you might appear, give the heads up. But if you don't, you just happen to show up, that's
But if
fine.
you know, it shouldn't be a planned threesome.
Exactly.
I mean, if you look around, oh my gosh, there's 2 other council people, you don't have to get up and leave.
No, you don't.
Okay.
But you would be prohibited from talking about any business that the council would normally discuss. You
Two
would,
other council members, yes.
that's right. So you can be there, but you have to shut up.
Well, you can address the planning commission on this. Yes.
My recommendation would be that if any of us are planning to attend a commission meeting, that we let Stephanie know about it.
That's probably the best.
So that way, if she hears from 3 of us that we're going to be there, she can put a notice of quorum out.
Like to be honest, next week's 4800 West. I can see that one. I've gone,
That's
okay,
one
do I
that
want to be here?
I
This
wanna
could
show
be
up for.
quite emotional. But that's what I'm saying. It could be an emotional, so we want, the problem we have to be careful, and I notice when I've come to even some of the planning commission, the public, once they see that it's the mayor or city council, they kind of head out with, if they want to talk to you outside instead of, here. Now, there's been occasion after the vote or what have they done, I've went out and maybe talked with some of them here, but that's where we have to be careful to let them deliberate the planning commission and not maybe influence that vote other than if you're trying to do as a resident. I think that's what you're saying, is be careful.
That
on
is what I'm saying.
influence on a plan, or I guess you can have influence, you can call them and.
It's your choice about how to have that influence, whether you want it or not. So, we do have one more topic, but is there anything else on open public meetings you want to touch on?
No.
Okay, we'll hit this somewhat quickly. I think we'll.
Sorry, just one other
Of
thing, just
course.
to clarify, because it is like election season and there's lots of campaign events going on. I mean, if 3 of us show up at a campaign event, we're good to go. We don't have to tell you guys or say, hey, okay, just
Nope.
making
Well,
sure
it
on that
depends
one.
if
And just try to avoid, just
Business day.
don't
We're not-
discuss
yeah.
the city's business
Okay.
while you meet up. Sometimes it's hard because this is a very important part of your lives, but don't
Well,
sit
it's
there
like
and talk
you
about.
said, it is campaign time. There's a lot of different meetings going on this next week. Hey, can you
Yep.
come and meet with this person? And so we just have to be careful. So you're saying we're okay if we also show up at some campaign event? Like if John Curtis, I think, invited everyone to luncheon in December, I think only 2 council members went, but was there 3 there?
Same rules. It's if you happen to know in advance that you might be there, great. Let us know. But if you don't, it's a chance gathering. You weren't planning on meeting there. And I apologize. I left my little items on there inadvertently. This one's also me.
I hear it.
So campaign finance questions. I am going the wrong direction. That's what's happening. All right, I'll quickly touch on the background state law rules and then some options for what the city can do moving forward. And maybe we'll probably have this as another discussion, obviously. So the default rules for campaign finances, as you all know, having done this, you have to have a separate campaign account. You have to make certain disclosures of the expenditures and contributions to that account at certain timelines. What's interesting, though, is for municipal candidates, unlike state candidates have ongoing reporting requirements as their campaign carries from year to year. There is no default municipal campaign finance disclosure requirement. You can carry a balance. It's not prohibited. You can carry from one 4-year term to the next. There's just no reporting requirement until that first one triggers in the primary or the municipal election cycle. There's an anonymous contribution limit of $50 and various penalties. In terms of conflicts, there's a lot of conflict rules about current officers. There is not much in the way of conflict rules for candidates. So if you're a current officer of the city who is running for re-election, you have those conflict rules, but they don't really apply to candidates. Under state law, we can expand all of these. There are some sometimes tricky issues with campaign finances because it is a free speech issue. The safest type of regulation to impose is to expand what the state has already done. So expand conflict of interest disclosure, conflict of interest laws, and finance disclosure laws. We can explore other options if you'd like. Out of that realm, it's a little more tricky to impose it, but entirely doable. So here are the kind of two general options. We just threw out some numbers and ideas for you to consider. We figured you would kind of mull on this and give us some direction. So again, the current finance disclosure requirement, 28 and 7 days before and 30 days after a municipal election. There's also 30 days or 7 days before and 30 days after a primary election if you are defeated in the primary election. Other than this, we could add additional reporting. So more of those forms that you fill out for your campaign finances, they're very fun. You could add weekly or bi-weekly reporting requirements throughout certain time periods or step it up as it gets closer to the election. We could also add in an annual reporting requirement. So if you carry a balance from year to year, you file one disclosure at the end of the year saying, I didn't do anything with my campaign account for the last year. That way it's just clear on the candidate's mind that it's still subject to the campaign rules and how you use those funds. We could impose new anonymous donation limits. The current one is $50. Anything above $50 that's an anonymous donation actually has to get, you have to transfer it to someone else, either the state or to a 501c3. There's rules about it. We can make that stricter. And then we could also expand the conflict of interest laws, which talk about not receiving money as a enticement to take a certain action or as a reward for action, and kind of expand that to address receiving donations from people who have an interest in the city's business or that the city regulates. There's a lot of ways we can do this. I highlighted some ways we can do it and then some just things for you to think through in terms of who this might regulate or not regulate. So in terms of restricting donations, often there's like more of a time limit that we care more about donations received within a certain time frame, but you don't have to have that. You could say you can't ever receive a donation from someone who meets certain criteria, or you can't receive a donation from a developer in Highland within a certain time period before or after the election. Or it could be you can't receive one before or after within a certain time period of the decision. So if someone did a development in Highland 4 years ago, it doesn't preclude them from making a donation 4 years later. They don't have anything active pending. If a resident lived in Highland and did a lot split, that's technically an application, but should that preclude them from making a donation in the future if they want? Those are just, how tailored do you want to make this is really the question. And in looking at that, here's some questions. So here are potential donor restrictions depending on how we craft this that may or may not be allowed, and also may or may not be allowed depending on when their last request or interaction with the city was. So we have current, future, and past developers. I just picked a bunch I could remember off the top of my head, but we have M&G, Patterson, D.R. Horton, Ivory, Boyer, Millhaven, Lennar, David Weekley, Edge Homes, but I could find probably another dozen of the smaller, 4 to 5 lot subdivision ones. Some of them are handled more by smaller individuals or smaller LLCs who just handle their own development. That's kind of I think the clear one of, if you're doing an active development, it's pending before the city, we can restrict it. But the next question I came out is because I reviewed several years worth of campaign finance disclosures just to see who's donated to Highland City candidates. Those entities might be involved with associations that advocate their interests, but they're not doing projects in Highland. They're not directly trying to influence a particular action. Is that something the council cares about or not? I don't know that it matters. We have Home Builders Association, there's Real Estate Association, Realtors Association. I could think of others, commercial entities that try to advance commercial businesses. It doesn't matter if, say a Wendy's is part of some PAC or some organization that is also going to advocate for something and it's going to make a donation. Is that a concern for the council? There's city contractors, people who've done business with the city as a contractor. So our engineers, our designers, our consultants, all of those types of people. Residents. Residents who have bought open space or who want to buy open space, who have asked adjustments for impact fees or other fees. Those who have land use appeals or variances pending or active before the city, or who have done it in the past within a certain time period. And then the final thing I could think of was, do you want to regulate owners or officers or other kind of entities or people involved with an association. So M&G or Patterson Homes can't donate, but can Wayne Patterson donate if they have an active development? These are just kind of to familiarize you with the scope of what we're trying to address and to see what concerns or what direction you wanted to give us.
So I have a question for you. So did you look at other cities to see what types of donor restrictions they have also? And this is some that others have.
Yes.
And then do other cities have restrictions on city council members donating, planning commissioners donating, staff donating? Or is that all?
Staff, yes, because that's more of a state law. There's a whole thing about staff involvement in campaign things. I have not seen another city restricting on like between candidates to each other or from a sitting council member to I have never seen that come up, or planning commission members.
I know Los Angeles restricts any developer doing current business in the city of LA is restricted from donating to any candidate for that city.
So yes, there's a lot of cities that have restrictions. I said those who are active developments, sometimes it's a little hard to tell. I mean, if someone has so Ridgeview is a great example. They'll have a development that goes on for quite a while, and it will involve multiple people coming in. When they are done, when is the time that, say, Boyer could then donate to the city again? Or can they never donate to the city candidate again because they did a development that was, very important development for the city? Councilmember Smith.
Can I just make a comment? I ran 4 different times for the council. And, well, I like some of the discussion on some of these things, and I think there's some valid points. But I think you need to be careful not to make so many rules and regulations that we discourage people from running. So, if I had to report what I personally spend on my campaign every week, that becomes a real burden because I work full-time, okay? So then it selects out people that don't work to run for council if they so desire. I think you have to be careful with that. I think you have to be careful making lots of rules and regulations. I think there's some that we really need to discuss, like maybe developers or whatever, and maybe have a good discussion. But, somebody that's related to somebody else, and maybe it's an open space issue and different things. It becomes, if you get too many rules, then it's almost impossible not to violate one of those, and oftentimes inadvertently. So it becomes really stressful as a candidate because we changed the way we put up our signs in the past. In the last election I ran, if my sign was 6 inches off, I had to either go move it or to have it taken down. And I thought that was a real burden. And so what you're doing, you got to be careful not to make so many rules and regulations that you discourage people from running because they ask themselves, why? Why do this? So I think, a word of caution. I think this is well-intentioned, but so are so many rules and laws are well-intentioned.
I agree with Scott.
Yeah.
I think it's a great point. The point I wanted to add on to that is in terms of enforcement of this, the only people who are available to enforce these campaign finance things and the city regulations are city staff, which puts staff in sometimes a very difficult position of telling what could be a current council member that they're violating city ordinances in part of their campaign, which is a hard place to put Stephanie as the election officer and me as a city attorney to have to do that type of activity. Now, of course, the council can direct and we'll carry out your wishes the best we can. That's just another consideration as part of this. So I think
I just would recommend caution.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions right now? I know I kind of threw a lot at you, and I figured you probably need to mull it over for a bit, but.
Well, right off the bat, the only one that I see any validity in is the developers. Developers that not past, but current or future developers should be restricted. That one, I believe, is something we should put in place. None of these others concern me at all.
Yeah, I'd be open to regulation against donations from someone who has active business with the city, but for the most part, I'm personally more interested in disclosure.
Any other thoughts before we wrap this up? We'll bring it back to the council with some additional thoughts and maybe options for getting a little more specific, but. Great.
I mean,
Thank you very
honestly, I don't think we're hearing a strong desire to change anything at this point. There's been a couple of individuals voice thoughts, but not a consensus by any means at this
So
point.
what you're saying is, do you want to have something come back about this developer thing, or do you want to have it as a discussion item future, or just kind of leave it as is? I guess that's,
Well, I think there's some obvious things we can work on. I think, you know, developers with business in the city that makes big I think we need to talk about the appropriateness of that. But at the same time, my feeling is I think we need to be careful not to make too many rules and regulations. Yeah, I agree with Ron on that, and also Doug.
so would you like to see something come back on about campaign about earmarking towards a developer?
Yeah, I'd like to have a good
Okay, I think
discussion what we
there
think's
is a
appropriate, not
consensus
appropriate.
that way.
Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
there
That-
is.
thank you for that
But
clarification.
that's the only one from my perspective.
With that, we'll go ahead. We'll close our work session. We have about 3 to 4 minutes before we'll start our city council meeting.
Father, we pray that you'll give each person here tonight wisdom and strength and energy that they may move ahead on the things that are very important to this community. And Father, we are just grateful that we have good neighbors that watch out for us, that take care of everything from the deer that come and eat our grass, to the little children that go to school here, to the police officers and firefighters that watch over us. We just have so many blessings, Father. We could go on and on tonight, but finally, Father, we just pray that you will be with the council and help them to make great decisions. And we pray in the name of Jesus. Amen.
All rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
At this time, we have set apart a time in our city council for unscheduled public appearances. If there's anyone that'd like to come and address the city council on the items that they see pertinent going on in the city, we'd like to invite them to come up at this time. If you'll please state your name clearly and keep your comments to 3 minutes. Anyone like to come up and address the council? Seeing none, we'll now close our unscheduled time for unscheduled public appearances, and we will move on to item number 2, which is consent items. We have 3 items on consent. We have our first item is consent item A, which is an action item of the approval of the meeting minutes from January 16th, 2024, and January 31st, 2024. Item number 2B is a action item of Planning Commission appointments. There will be 3 appointments going on there with Jerry Abbott and Trent Thane, who are current planning commissioners. We're renewing their terms. We have Deborah Mong, who's been an alternate that will now become a planning commissioner, replacing Jay Roundy. And we have appointment of Wesley Warren and Sherry Kramer as alternate planning commissioners. We then have item number 2C, which is an ordinance. It's a contract for the city attorney, planning and zoning administrator, which is for Rob Patterson. Does anyone need to pull any consent items?
I would like to pull item 2A.
2A?
I'd like to pull item 2B and 2C. I have some questions.
Okay, so we will now, since all items have been pulled, we will now go on to item number 2A. Brittany, you have a...
Yeah, I just had one question about the minutes. Was it the 16th that we had the alcohol discussion? So I think that one of the names in the packet is wrong. I think that it was not Naomi Sorensen. I think it was Kim.
Dayami, Dyami.
Her name is listed in the attendance and then in a comment.
And that's on page 12 of the minutes from that day.
Kim, did you say her name was spelled Dyami?
Yes.
Okay. And then Sorensen, S-E-N?
Sorensen.
Thank you.
Additionally, on page 13 of the minutes, under Delisha Mills' comments, it reads, nothing to do with fear of judgment of other people, and I checked the recording, that should be nothing to do with fear or judgment of other people. And I think that materially changes her comments, so.
Okay, with that, are there anything else underneath 2A? So we'll need to make those amendments. So is there a motion?
I move to approve the minutes with the amendments as listed.
I'll second.
Okay, I have a motion by Doug, second by Kim. If there's no further discussion, let's go ahead and we'll vote on just number 2A.
I forgot.
Okay. Devin, see if she can get in before we... Okay, Ron, will you go ahead? What's your...
Yes.
Okay, then we go ahead and reveal. That passes 5-0. We'll now move on to consent item number 2B, which is our planning commissioner appointments. I believe, Scott, you had some questions.
I did. Can I address 2C first?
Sure.
Okay. And Aaron, it says that you're kind of present this, and we all are familiar with this. We've talked about this in the past, and I really don't have any problems with the issue. Would it be appropriate if I ask our city attorney in his role? I would have 4 questions about the contract. Definitions, basically.
So this is the, okay, for the public to understand what we're doing, we are hiring our city attorney to become the city attorney / planning commissioner. We're going to have a question on the legality of the contract question for Rob's. Okay, I just want to make sure that's
Yes,
clear.
Councilmember Smith.
So we need an attorney to describe these words. Okay, so in the contract says if we let whoever we're talking about here go for cause, we can do that for the following words. And I just want a legal opinion because I've never understood these words. Misfeasance, malfeasance, nonfeasance. Can you tell me the difference between the 3 and what they are?
They are more archaic terms. They're essentially different ways of describing violating your duties as an officer of the city. Misfeasance is a lower standard, comparable kind of to gross negligence. Malfeasance is more of an intentional dereliction of duty. Nonfeasance is the omission of something that you should have done, more of a reckless. You knew you should have done something and you didn't. Technically, all city officers are subject to those things. That's the only way you actually can remove a city officer. So that is the general definition of those terms as an independent legal reviewer of this.
Okay, thank you. And then will you tell me what the definition is of moral turpitude?
Moral turpitude, again, another one of those archaic terms, typically comes up, it used to involve a lot more different crimes. Those have been narrowed somewhat, but usually it's of a sexual nature or of a violent action, something that impugns the morals of the person who committed the crime.
Okay, thank you. Can I make a motion then on 2C?
Yep.
I move that the Highlands City Council approve the contract for city attorney, planning, and zoning administrator as delineated in the agenda.
I'll second.
I have a motion by Scott, second by Brittany. Any further discussion on this?
One last item, just to a point of clarification for everybody, that I checked in with earlier, and that in addition to the salary that we're looking at, there's about a $4,600 a year additional cost for subscriptions that we're accepting as part of this.
Correct. And I believe those are, one is for, for his bar, for the bar, because it's an attorney. Then there's some training that we're also committing to, since this is also our city planner / attorney, there's some training or conferences that is also part of that. One thing the council needs to also be aware of, this contract, even though it was put together by our attorney, we did have it looked at by a separate attorney, so to have some other eyes on it. We actually had the Alpine City Attorney look at it, just if you're wondering on that behalf. So we did have another attorney's eyes on it.
Can I make one comment, although the motion's moving, but for the public, Rob has been serving as our city attorney, but he's been highly involved in zoning and planning for several months. When our former city administrator left, who was specialized in zoning and planning, I think you came in and filled and helped Kelly, our former zoner and planner, and then we've been trying for several months to replace Kelly, and so it seemed a natural fit since of all your expertise, and you've been highly involved to go ahead and do it.
And since this, we're discussing this, be very transparent. What we were paying, what we had as our contract for city attorney, and what we'd been paying for our past, there for our land use, and therefore in our I'm not saying code for our planner, as we looked at that combined wage, is where we kind of looked at there for, we thought, okay, we did not have a lot of applicants for the city planner, is where we were struggling. So when we went out last summer saying, okay, we don't have a city planner, so we're gonna have to go an outside source, as we looked at the contractor and we looked at what Rob's wage was very competitive, and what we felt like having an attorney do the land use, and that has been experienced in the city, was way far and better. So we went that way. We've been functioning that way for about 6 months. We opened it up to out in the public there for applications. Those applications we didn't get a lot back in. As we open this up as having an attorney / city planner, we then open it up the same way with that definition, and we didn't get any applications. Correct? And I'm stating that right?
Well, we had one application
Well,
from
never mind.
Rob.
We did have one application, and that's our applicant tonight.
Which I would highly recommend that you appoint.
Yeah, you're drafted. Anyway, so if there's no other discussion, then we'd be open for a motion on number 2C.
We already made it.
Oh, I'm sorry, we need to have a vote now. So if we can have a vote screen up here. Just on motion number 2C.
Or, yeah,
It might
2C.
be easy to
We
just
may
do a
need to do
voice
this
vote
voice.
Yeah, we'll just do a
because
voice.
we split out
We'll
the
start down here
consent.
with you, Ron.
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
And Brittany.
Yes.
That passes 5-0. Well, now I'll go back up to item number 2B. And that, Scott, I think you had questions on that one.
I'm more than anything else, I just want to make some comments about planning commission appointments, because the mayor has called each one on the council, and we've talked about the different candidates. First of all, I'd like to express appreciation to any member of the community who's willing to serve and spend the time on the planning commission. And I think with the changes in the state code, that the role of planning commissioner has become even more important in the city. And I appreciate the efforts because there's not a lot of compensation, but there can be a lot of time. And some of the only public hearings that may occur on some of the developments in the city will occur in front of the planning commission. And having sat on the council for a few years, we all know sometimes that people become quite emotional about things that are happening in their neighborhood. So I appreciate everyone that has stepped up and wanted to be part of the planning commission. That said, I just want to emphasize one thing. I think it's very important for the planning commissioners to make every effort to be present at the meetings, okay? Because I think there's been a little problem in the past with votes being like 3 or 4 commissioners there, and I think we need to have as many there as possible, and if they can't be there, to call the alternate. The second thing is, I think as a planning commission person, and I've talked, I'm kind of part of what I consider old Highland. I've been here for 35 years, and I kind of, when I moved into Highland, there were 5,000 people, and we had kind of a rural setting and fairly conservative. And I think it's very important that the viewpoint of all citizens be respected, but sometimes reflecting back a little bit on the history of the city and kind of what makes Highland Highland. Because I worry sometimes, and I brought this up in other meetings, is that sometimes, and we welcome everyone that moves to Highland from other parts of the country and the state, but sometimes there's kind of a big push to change everything in Highland, yet the reason they moved here was the other reason. So I just like them to keep in mind kind of the historical perspective. And so I think it's important that commissioners not only attend the meetings, but I think they need to have kind of treat it with dignity and respect, you know, and I think that, and sometimes I think there's a tendency that we can get too casual in our city responsibilities. So I just like to make those comments.
Can I add to that I think that applies to the alternates? If you think of this, those who are alternates, as an alternate to a jury, you're going to be there because you could be called upon. And if you're not there for all these meetings, I just encourage you just to be there the same as if you were a commissioner full-time, that the alternates are an extremely important role, and you could be called upon at any time. And so I'd encourage the alternates to be there, exactly what Scott is saying.
I have a question for you. Did we only have 2 applicants for Planning Commission, Sherry and Wes?
No, we had about 6 applicants. I actually, out of the 6, I actually had visits with 5. One of them came in a little later, so I actually did a phone call and had that. So every applicant I visited with, but we had 6 applicants come in.
I guess I'm looking at the timeline here, and it shows that Jerry Abbott's been on since 2018, so that'll be 10 years on the Planning Commission, and Trent Thane has been on since 2021, so that'll be 7 years. As an advocate for term limits, I just think we should give other people a chance to volunteer and be on the Planning Commission, and that'll mean that more people can be involved in Highland, and also, you know, more people will be able to want to run for Planning Commission. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration, is looking at these timelines and saying, you know, we've done a good job, but at the same time, you know, it's time to let other people have the opportunity to serve as well.
So let's go through who, you know, Jerry Abbott, I do believe he came on the 18th. Now you're seeing, today is, you know, 2024, so he's been there for
It's
6
just in the notes. Mr. Abbott has been serving since 2018.
Yeah, that's what I say, but right now it's 2024, so that's 6 years.
Uh-huh.
I don't think, sometimes you want consistency. I also think if that's the case, then there's some that maybe we shouldn't have. When you say term limits, we have to look also at the council. There's been some wisdom in having some continuity, and there's wisdom to have some new. Trent Thane has only been there for 2 years, who's coming on. He fulfilled another term that was there.
Mm-hmm.
Then as you look, then we have Deborah Mon has been on, I think, only a year, because she was an alternate and then coming. So some of these, as you see coming on, you know, I'll be very transparent. If I was going to stack the Planning Commission, there'd probably be some, what I mean by stack is I have a certain, you know, I'm a large lot guy. I'm probably a lot like Scott. I've been here a long term. That I'd love not to see a lot of change, but I looked at it and going, okay, we need to have the voice of all. I looked at we need to have diversity voice. That sometimes that's where you get a better discussion, you get better outcome. I think when you have different points of view. And I'll tell you, as I look across some of our planning commissioners, they're not all a yes. The one thing I have noticed, they work good together, but they usually will have a good conversation. You'll have some that will share a different opinion, but I believe they come to good decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think, we're in a good area where we have more people willing to serve. And so if there's opportunities there to get more people on planning commission that would like to be there, then let's open up that opportunity for others.
Could we entertain an idea that we just limit it to 8 years?
Yeah.
8 years, I think, gives us the consistency that we are looking for, that I think is important. But anything over 8 years, I think we need some fresh blood and new opportunities.
That's a good, if we want to do that, that's something we'd have to probably put in our the body.
Yeah.
That would say, hey, for a planning commission, they shouldn't be able to serve more than 8 years. Does that make sense? And that's something we'd have to adopt if that's something we feel strong on.
Right.
You'll have a couple that might be coming up that's been there, but but we'll see, because that would affect one or two coming up that probably they've served. It's helped with some consistency. I think one of the problems you bring up about having someone always here at planning commissions, also having experience. Since I've been the mayor, we've had a lot of turnover. And it's just people, they take jobs, they have other commitments, and so you're also looking for consistency to help through decisions going forward.
Yeah, I just think, being on council for 4 years now, I definitely think there's consistency there. And then we're talking 8-10 years. I guess where is that consistency?
Well, you're going to be on for
timeline?
8 years. So
Yeah.
You're going to be 8.
Very long time.
And Jerry probably fulfilled someone else.
I say 8 is max.
But I'm just saying, the way he's going to have the 10 years is that right now he's at 6. So Jerry, I think, is the only one that's on here that you're worried about is probably Jerry Abbott. I'll tell you, I think Jerry brings vital. I understand he's a developer, but he also brings in a good vision of things he's brought up things, I think, in planning commission that we had not looked at that maybe we need to have as a warning sign. I learned a lot from Jerry. So.
That's another question I do have. I know we talked about campaign finance and developers. Is there any issues that we have with having people on planning commission that are in active development or developers here in Highland City?
I don't think Jerry does anything here in Highland.
No, we do have another member though.
No direct conflict. When it comes to their development, they essentially have to kind of take this side and present it as the property owner and not as the planning commission member, so they shouldn't vote on their own application or review it. But in terms of everything else, they're still welcome to participate.
So they can still influence city council members,
Yeah.
talk to them and everything like that. Okay.
Just as anyone else, yes.
Well, you bring up that. Well, we have issues going on by our subdivisions. This, we had one that just came in that was off 6400. That was right next to my neighborhood. Now, it was a pretty benign development. It came into the planning commission, never really came to us. But that's something that sometimes when you live close. Now, I think what your question is, if you have an active developer that's here in the city, that might be something we have to look at. Hey, do we want to have them on the planning commission going forward?
Yeah.
Because it seems like they're active doing the development.
Yeah.
We have not had, we had a realtor that was also on that probably had sold some homes in Highland. So you have a developer, you have a realtor, you might have a contractor here that's an HVAC contractor that might do some plumbing or I'm just saying
but those don't come to the council in which we make motions and
No, and
approvals and
I-
decisions on.
And Kim, I agree. I think we have to be careful. We're talking about
Very
developers for
careful.
campaign.
Mhm.
We were a little surprised. I think, at least I was, when we saw one of our planning commissioners also bring development. That was a little bit of a surprise. I didn't even know that they did development.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, I think I think there's been a good discussion, and I agree with a lot of the points. I think you have to always assume, and if you have a big pool of people that want to be on the planning commission, then I think you can do some of the term limits. But if you don't have people that are qualified or no one interested, is it better to keep someone that's been there a while with experience? So I think the mayor has to kind of make some careful
I will
judgment.
tell you, up until 3 weeks ago, we had not had a lot of applicants. I put it out, and I'd mentioned it even when we were doing the candidate thing. Hey, please keep involved. We had not had a lot of applications. when we put this on the agenda, I think it's been almost now a month ago when it first was going to come up. After that, then we started having a lot of applicants.
Yeah.
And so up until that time, we had not had a lot of applicants. But, and I'll be, yeah, we had some good applicants. And so you look and you go, okay, but I also believe those that were being appointed are good applicants.
So, Mayor, let me ask you a question. So if someone's applied and they weren't chosen this time, does their name stay in the pool, or do they have to reapply several times?
Traditionally, we keep, when an applicant comes in, I give the application to Stephanie. She'll copy it. I then have a file in the mayor's area, and Mayor Mann had the file. So, I mean, I actually went back, and I've seen a couple of years back, 2 years ago, we were struggling to get applicants, and so I was actually digging back in to see if there were some of those applicants. There was one when we recognized that we have one of our alternates was stepping down. I did kind of reach, and I was going, okay, where are we going to be reaching back in to find one? Well, that person then renewed an application they'd already put in. So there's been a couple that had it that renewed them.
So there's some that weren't chosen this time that could still be in the pool, right?
But
And if we had somebody resign or move, or they got sick, or
so what's going to happen is during a resignation, so this happens every February, we're usually going to have appointments. I'd recommend that as a city, we open up the application for planning commission probably at the very first, they're in December, so you have some time. Now, if we have people fall off, because you might have a couple of these planning commissioners, a job change, or they move, which we've had, quite a few. If that happens, that will probably, we won't open up to we'll probably go back in the application pool.
Right. And you had a really good commissioner that got ill.
Yeah.
And,
that's, as you talk about, that was a shock. We had one, and we've had to have the alternate, but we've had, I know Rod Mann, when he was the mayor, I think for 1 year, we had 3 people that moved or had to come out. I mean, also, we had a lot of planning commissioners moving right there at that time. So it's, they're a bigger body than we are as a council. And so you have 7, you really have 9 on there, so you're going to have some change. So, any other questions? I think it's been a good discussion.
That was a good discussion. I like that.
I think our planning commission, Kim, I think it's something we've got to look at for the term. I think we got to look at if they have an active development. We're saying this, we might need to look at that also as a planning commissioner. I do know the planning commissioner, when that development came in, they did take a step back, meaning they were not up on they actually weren't on the stand at all. They actually left the stand when their application was before the planning commission.
Are we sure that they have to, Rob, this is a question for you.
Rob? The question is,
do they have to leave the stand? They have to step back if they have a conflict? I think they just have to disclose.
So I always recommend that they
we recommend it.
Recommend it, and technically they are required to not use their official position to give themselves special benefits.
Okay.
How I usually say is the best way to do that is to not vote on anything that directly influences your economic situation. Now, technically, they could still vote. I mean, unless you kick them out of the chair, they could try to take a vote on it. I've never seen someone not step down when there's a recommendation on that level of.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question before we go to them? So on the alternates, they serve for 1 year. Is it typical for them to be reappointed if they so desire?
We have never had, they've usually got appointed for 4 years. The reason we did 1 year is we wanted to make sure they were showing up. So this comes back, are they engaging? Because usually if you can get a sense, like Deborah, to be honest, she, as an alternate, was probably more consistent than some of the other planning commissioners. And so you see us now move the alternate. I think that alternate position gets to have us, there's twofold. One, we get to see, are they engaged as an alternate? But 2, we also get a couple of times to see how they vote. Are they engaged in the conversation? Do they come prepared? Is there concerns from that? I think it gives the council a little bit of a feel there.
Do we usually have 2 alternates, or just
we
one?
brought that up, I think, a couple of years back, where just because we were having some times where we've had times even where we've had 2 alternates and 7 where we've only had a body of 4. And so I think before 2 years ago, we only had 1 alternate. I think we added to have 2.
So then how does it work if somebody doesn't show up? We need the alternate. Which alternate?
That's going to be that. We have not had a lot of that as an issue, so that will be, they'll probably have to rotate back and forth. Maybe one will be this time, and if then the next one has the next time.
My recollection is that the code specifies that they alternate.
Actually, when I came on planning commission, I started as an alternate, and there was another alternate. So There were two at that time,
Okay.
oh, probably a good 8 years ago. I guess, you know, I think it's, but did you come on, Brittany, as an
When I
alternate?
came on, there were two. Yeah, I was an alternate. There
Okay,
were
so
two of
it's
us.
probably been out there for a little bit where we've had. They wanted to test me before you, Ron, they trusted you better.
Yeah, they knew me, right?
Can I ask one last question, and not to belabor the point? So do you feel between those that have been appointed, and because I don't know all these people personally, and your alternates, that you have a good diversity of opinion, or do you think it leans one way or the other? What's your feeling? Because I think the state code has entrusted the planning commission with a lot of responsibility now, and I'd just like to know,
Are you asking my opinion?
yeah, do you
Your 5 people you're appointing, you have 2 that are probably going to be a lot more lenient on some development. They're going to favor a little higher density. They might some things, and you'll have.
You're saying the two that you are appointing now?
Yeah, there's going to be diversity. There's going to be more of a diverse coming on, but there's also voices. I think this is probably one of our more diverse appointments.
It's more balanced.
Yeah. Meaning you're not going to have, it's not strong one side or another. It's more even.
Oh.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things that we kind of, R140 and different things. Now, there's not that much land left to develop, but I just kind of wanted to feel.
Now, of them all, one of the things that they all, when I talk with the planning commissioner or they put an application, I talk about what they think from the general plan. How do they see Highland developing out? What do they think of our general plan? I talk about, do they have the time to commit? You know, I'll ask some things just to kind of get what their sense is of what they'd like to see in Highland. And so you kind of get a sense of what they're sharing. I would say most all of out of everyone, I think all of them have bought into our current general plan that's from 2008, which favors us as a little bit larger lots. However, the definition of a large lot for some might be a different definition. Does that answer?
That said, the planning commission, if it's zoned R140, planning commission cannot change that.
Correct.
Right.
It's R140. They approve it if it's within that.
Parameter.
And that's really the staff that's going to do all that work to make sure that all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. So I don't see, I like the idea that we're more balanced, but I don't see it really having an impact in terms of changing anything of what their role is. Their role is to make sure that the development code is being followed. That's really their role.
Well, I just have to say that these two alternates that are being put forth before us, I personally know both of them, very involved in our city government. Wes, I can't remember a single meeting that he has missed within the past 4 years. He is at all the events, has been on the library board. I don't know how many boards you've been on, Wes, to be honest.
He's been
on
over
everything.
in our Parks Committee. And
Parks
he does
Committee, fundraising. I mean, if anyone deserves it, is Wes. Completely involved in our city, and I know without a shadow of a doubt that he'll be there at those planning commission meetings. And then Sherry Kramer as well. She's amazing. She's brought a lot of experience, great thinking patterns, and has city council experience as well in American Fork. So I'm excited about these two alternates that we're putting on the planning commission.
I'll share a little bit more. So Sherry's over by 9600 North. One of the areas we did not have a lot of representation in the city was over in the 9600 North area. And so I actually was looking, so as we look at some of the applicants, I did look. It's not a hard, fast rule to say have across, but I have looked to see where some are at in the city. So that's, when you talk about diversity, it's also not clumped in one area of the city. Yeah. They're more diverse to the city, so they have a kind of an area. You know, there are some areas that we're missing, but if you look geographically, you will see that they are splattered throughout our city a little bit more and not in one specific area. So as I looked, yeah, they're probably out of those 6 applicants, there might be 4 that were equal. Then I started looking geographically. I looked at what you said. Have they showed up to city council meetings or have they been engaged in the city? Your 2 alternates probably have been, just as any of our residents, more at our city council meetings than almost any other resident, other than, to be honest, Liz Rice. You've been here, and Natalie Ball. And I'll be very transparent. Liz did put in an application, and she was a strong applicant, and she did live on 9600 North. Does that, so that was a strong consideration. Yeah, and so, I mean, so yeah, I can tell you where every woman lives. I can tell you, kind of what's going on. So we sat down, we visited, and I think, for Liz, I think it was her second application in. I think Wes, there was 2 that's come in. Wes, I think we had applications for library counts, because we're going, okay, hold on, we had the one from the library. I think we had one for the Parks, Trails, and Tree Committee. We have one for, for the Planning Commission. And so Wes has been one that's been engaged in the city. And I had a good visit with Wes. And I appreciate his diligence. I appreciate Jerry. I had visits with Jerry. I actually went to lunch with Jerry to say, hey, you have still time. Watch your thought. Jerry was very engaged. He actually ran for city council here 2 years ago. Trent Thane, he lives over off 6400 West. He actually is one of my neighbors. I don't think he's missed a planning commission since he's been appointed. Deborah Mong is the same thing. She was our alternate. She's been here for the last, Sherry and Deborah both reached out and says, I'm sorry, I'm not going to make it tonight. We kept moving this on the agenda, so they didn't know they had, one was out of town, one had a family commitment. But Deborah has been here, I think, the last 2 or 3 council meetings out here. And so I'm going, I think they're engaged. And so.
And I also like that they're not one issue candidates. Like, really, they have been involved in many aspects of our city. I can remember Sherry coming 4 years ago as well to a lot of the city council meetings throughout these years, and not just within the recent amount of time because of one issue. So that's a great aspect that we have from those 2 candidates for the alternate planning commission. So with that, I'd love to make a motion if we're okay. I move that we, let's see here. Is it 2B? Thanks. Oh, God, I need my link here. I move that the city council ratify the mayor's appointment of Jerry Abbott and Trent Thane to serve a 4-year term, Deborah Mon to serve a 1-year term on the planning commission, and as alternates, Sherry Kramer and Wesley Warren to serve a 1-year term.
I second that.
We have a motion by Kim, second by Ron. Any further discussion needed? I appreciate the discussion. I think this is a really important body, so I think it was a good discussion.
By way of clarification, did you say Deborah Mon will be moved to a 1-year term or to the full-time 4-year
Well, no,
term?
she's fulfilling.
She's filling the remainder of the 1-year term.
Jay Roundy's term, and so that's the 1-year term, and so she would be coming up again next year, but she's fulfilling Jay Roundy's term. Okay, we have that as a motion second. If there's no other discussion, do we have as electronic vote? Do we need to do voice vote? Okay, then we'll start down here with Brittany.
Yes.
Scott.
Abstain.
Okay.
Yes.
Doug.
Yes.
Tim and Ron.
Yes.
That's a 5-0. We now have our planning commission. Okay, we will now move on to our discussion items. Our first discussion, now a discussion item is not an item that has an active vote on it. It's just a discussion. Our first one will be item number 3A, which is the Town Center Overlay Sign Amendment. And Rob, we have you doing that one.
Yes, as the city's planning and zoning administrator, I'll be presenting this item.
You haven't officially been hired yet.
I have not been. This is a request from WPI. WPI is the primary owner and developer of the property, the town center commercial area, so the Wendy's, Myers, Cubby's, Jurassic Taco, Creamworks, Fizz. I remember if I forgot any of your other tenants there. That area over there. A little while back, a little over 2 years ago, they were doing that pad that's now become the Cubby's area, and they negotiated with the city for some transfer of property so they could do a drive-through, and then we had a discussion as part of that regarding an additional access through the Rocky Mountain Power area. And through some great negotiation by council, primarily the prior mayor, we actually managed to secure an easement on Rocky Mountain Power's property to allow for an additional public access into that area. They've come and they've had some, and I'll let them present for their own discussion, kind of more of the goals and purpose of this, but as they've seen it, it would be helpful to have a little bit additional signage, especially on that Rocky Mountain Power along 5600 South, or West, yes, so that it's a little bit more visible, that's not just like a utility access road, that's actually an access road into the commercial center over there. Our current sign regulations don't allow any off-premise signs, meaning signs located on property not associated with the commercial use. So that would be the Rocky Mountain Power property. That property is still owned by Rocky Mountain Power. We only have an easement. So as part of this, it's a kind of a few couple moving parts in this. One is, would the council be amenable to a potential ordinance amendment to allow off-premise signs in some limited capacity for this commercial area? Would we also be willing to work with Rocky Mountain Power to kind of facilitate that exchange? Rocky Mountain Power gave the city the easement. It's not a commercially owned easement. It's the city's easement. And then they also had a little bit of, they wanted to do on the other side along Town Center Boulevard, along that last undeveloped pad there, to do a new sign there near the intersection. It might require a little bit of tweaking of the code depending on what actually ends up getting proposed. So the next slide is just their high-level concept. You can see over there on the west side, little monument location call out there. So like they're proposing a sign right on that corner along 5600 West. And then the other one on the east side towards Town Center Boulevard near that intersection as well. And this is their general concept for what that sign would look like. Obviously, this is a high-level design. Nothing's been finally proposed. This is more of a, as the mayor noted, a discussion item. See whether there's something the council's interested in. If the council is in some shape, they would then submit a text amendment application. We'd go through the process of planning commission and council review and ultimate decision with or without any changes.
I'll
with that-
start here by saying that I like the concept. I had some concerns, but I ended up answering my own question. How do we decide, if we limit it to two, what those two are? But I guess we leave that up to WPI to work out with their residents, and it's part of their negotiations for their leases, et cetera. So I don't have any concern. I really believe that Myers does need some more visibility than what they have right now. I mean, I've literally talked to people that in my ward that didn't know where Myers were. They heard about it, but they didn't know where it was. So they need some more visibility.
I'm also happy to answer any other questions, and also WPIU representatives are here. and
So
able
can
to
you help
talk to
me?
there about their
So
proposal as well.
you have up here a red markings. Is that the site view? I mean, some of my concern.
That's the proposed site view showing that you do have access where the sign is. I mean, again, this
Because
is
that
kind
was
of
my concern. You have a 7-foot sign, which seems a little high.
Our default rule is 6 feet high for monument signs, so that would be a difference. And we also have site triangle regulations that I guess Andy could speak to, but we would ensure that whatever we do would be safe in terms of a visual standpoint.
Mayor, but this wouldn't include Myers, right? They're not part of the WPI, are they? So
Yeah, they are.
they are?
They're part of the zone, so we could include them as part of the zoning regulations.
We
for
could
the
ask the
sign.
But this is
developers-
a specific to WPI, right?
I think that would be a question we could ask if this, because at one time, that's the question I think we have is the
Yeah.
is signs for this whole area. I think as you look at the property here, Marsh Myers, from my understanding, bought the property himself, has his own parking lot, but might have a cross-access easement for parking. And I think the other 3 buildings and possibly a 4th that might be proposed is WPI property. And so we need to maybe ask on, where are the signs at currently, I think, for each of these businesses? I know where Wendy's is at. I think where Ron, your question is, maybe we need to understand what signs currently are there, but we could have the applicant say, hey, I recognize this new road that goes out to 5600. I think some wonder, where does this road go? And so to
Right.
me, the 5600 kind of makes sense. The one out on Town Center would maybe be a question on, hey, is there a question about where they turn in? Do they need one of the Town Center? I do think the 5600 West one makes a little bit of sense.
There's currently a Wendy's monument sign. There's a Myers monument sign somewhere.
That's what I think.
Can't quite see it.
I think it's out in
It's somewhere along here. You can see it when you drive past it. So
is
there
there
is
another
one there.
monument for? I mean, I think the Lash Works there needs a sign. I mean, I think all of your small tenants. I recognize, and I love Myers Bates. I mean, my wife knows it's probably one of my favorite places. I used to call it the man's grocery store, but now that I go in, I see just as many females as men, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But we all seem to love the meats, the bakeries, and all their produce, but I worry about the smaller tenants here. I worry about Lashworks. I worry about your Jurassic Taco. I worry about your UPS store here. You know, and I'm just.
Well, I think also I've talked to several of these businesses. I've even talked to the Costa Vida and the Arby's, and that's kind of one of their number one complaints is that sign restrictions and being able to advertise to people that this is where they're at, and this is a location that's hard to see what's in there and what they have to offer. So any way that we can help make our businesses successful, I am for.
So our current sign regulations are kind of broken down by different zones. So we can do it just here, but we also could just do it for all commercial zones and, adopt sign regulations allow certain types of signs for all zones.
I would love that. Then it would be consistent as well.
Is there other questions? Do we want to hear from the applicant? Or now, this is not an applicant. This is just a discussion item. This is the WPI, which WPI I think has our Macy's shopping center, has all that Macy's property. They have that new building out in front of Burt Brothers Tires. They have they have a lot of our commercial. So, any questions before we have WPI, Scott?
I'd just like to make a comment. I agree that we want people to know that our businesses are there. And I think some tweaking of the code is good. I think there was a lot of discussion, though. I don't think we want our signage to start looking like some of the other cities around here, where you have these big, I hate driving down State Street in Orem, just because I think it doesn't look good. So I think there's kind of a balance. We want our businesses, we want to have the signage and stuff, but I think at the same time, having something that looks attractive, that's maybe consistent, I would lean more towards. Because you can really go the other extreme.
Well, we could even put that in there of, what type of look you would want for the sign.
I think it's covered by the monument.
It is. My question is, though, across the way at M&G, didn't we approve a larger sign over there for them?
You did do a tweak to it's the, I think the language is commercial freestanding sign. It's the tall sign that has all of the tenants listed on it. These are proposed monument signs. They're the lower, little wall signs, not the ones that go up, more than 10, 15 feet.
I mean, and I think what Scott's bringing up, we've got to make some decisions. We allowed M&G across the way to have a taller sign. When we talk now about, can you guys name, other than where you're going to go to eat, can you name the restaurants or the businesses that are there by Macy's? We just talked about the Lashworks, but you got the flower shop that's there. You got Mathnasium. You got Papa Murphy's. You got another Nell place that was there. You used to have a dog place inside there, but they're gone. You have other businesses that be very open. It's hard for the smaller businesses. They come and go in these strip centers. Are we favoring M&G across the way with allowing them to have a bigger sign to come in, and yet we have existing business that we're struggling? Scott, I do agree. We have to be careful what the look is, but we just allowed M&G across the way, I think, to have a big sign.
Well, I just think we need to be consistent, but I think there's kind of a sense of the way we want our city to look too. And I want these businesses to be really successful, but I think at the same time, I think we have to be careful with signage.
Good point. It's a hard one. You don't want to look like you said, down the State Street, but yet you want to help your businesses succeed. They're here.
I know.
If there's representation here from the developer, we'd love to have you come up and maybe share some of your thoughts on the signs.
Yeah, hi, my name's Daniel Schmidt with WPI. Thanks for having us and entertaining the discussion. I think what you have really is an evolving situation. While it all sounds like you're all in support of the small businesses and their success, when SR92 or Timpanogos Highway was sort of the primary exposure road, and as the commercials developed out along there, you've got also in the Macy's Shopping Center, Alpine Highway. And so there are signs on those piece with two side streets that per code don't currently allow signage. The tenants will take as much signage as you give them, and as high and as bright as you'll allow. That being said, I think all tenants also appreciate, as well as developers appreciate, need for restrictions and conformity and sort of a look and a feel and character of the community. The tenants that we have there are opening. Cubbies is the latest to open, and everyone's quite excited. It depends on the day that you talk to them, how good they're doing versus not, and how. But I think all that being said, everyone's quite hopeful. We do have what we call that third pad on Highland Town Centre Boulevard to develop. We would anticipate that if any monument sign, we'll call it a monument sign, 6-7 feet odd, were to be approved there, that would be primarily for that pad. The signage out on the 5600 West would be, we've been discussing that with Myers, if he feel like that would be a benefit to him or for him. He's certainly welcome to join with us on that signage. I'd be happy to talk to you about where signage currently is, or anything else, or answer any of your other questions.
So the question for me, I guess what I'd be wondering, I think as a council, is 7 feet too tall? Not tall enough? I mean, if you look, you're probably 6 feet tall.
I'm
so
6 feet.
You're going another foot. Yeah, I'm just saying it's on these side roads. Is that what the look we want to have on 5600? I think going back to what Scott's asking, is that what we envision? Now we have SR92. You said you already have monument signs. There's a question about Myers. Is Myers sharing on a sign with you, or is that something they got their own sign because they have their own pad? How's your signage working out for your different parcels?
Yeah, thanks for asking me. Well, there's a little bit of a mixed situation currently on ground, and so let me tell you what's currently happening on the ground and what will be happening and or changing. And so out in front of you've got we'll call it a monument size sign in front of Wendy's.
So what's a monument size would be what size to you?
6-7 feet.
Okay, so
Okay.
so the Wendy's is what we're.
Yeah, and it's just for Wendy's. In front of what we'll call this middle pad, or the Fizz building, there's another sort of sign that's 6 or 7 feet currently that has
And it has
Myers
all three tenants on it, right?
Well, currently has Myers, and I don't recall if there's other tenants on there. But that was to sort of help Myers when he originally opened, and with the idea that other tenants would be moving on that sign, would replace his signage with a taller sign. We built the taller sign that's effectively in front of, we'll call it the Cubbies building. It's not directly in front. Myers has the top half of that sign. I'm going to tell you that I don't know how tall that sign is. That might be 10 feet. Myers has the top half, and there's a place for 4 panels on the bottom that will accommodate the tenants in that building. That's what's there on the ground today. What's supposed to be happening is just a small modification. We have an agreement with Wendy's to replace that signage that they have on their property with a taller sign that the city approved at the time of the entitlements with Myers. And we'll be removing the sign in front of the Fizz building, replacing it. So it's sort of consolidating the signage. You've got 3 signs along there. We'll have 2 taller ones. Wendy's will be on the top half of that one, and the tenants in the Fizz building will be represented on the bottom half, and we'll be demolishing the monument sign in front of the Fizz building.
Any questions for Mr. Schmidt with WPI?
So we're basically talking about 7-foot signs. Is that what I
On
understand?
what the request is, on 5600 West is a 7-foot sign. The request is over on Town Center Boulevard, a 7-foot sign. They already have 2 or 3 monument signs currently. It sounds like you're going to go to 2 at a little tall. Do you know how tall?
I don't. I'm just going to say it's 10 feet. I don't
Okay,
recall
so they're going
how
to have
tall it
a
is.
lot more substantial signs out on Timpanogos SR92. So, okay, there's no other question.
Okay, well, I have a question on
Yes.
Is Myers one of the 2 names that would be on there?
On 5600 West?
On the two streets here.
Yes. One on the left is 5600 West, the one on the right is Town Centre Boulevard. That has been discussed with Myers. Yes. Okay. No commitments, no approvals, so we're not sure what to say and discuss. But, we came to staff. Staff thought that they seem to like the idea, but of course it's council's decision, and I thought we'd throw it to the council as a discussion item to see if it's even worth entertaining. Maybe we can work with staff and come up with a sort of appropriate code modifications with your direction and bring it back for approval.
Okay. There's no other. Thank you.
Thank you.
So council will bring it back. So, this is a discussion item. I mean, my input, I do worry about on our side roads here. You've got monument signs that are gonna be fairly large out in front. To me, these should be more of a directional type of sign saying, hey, this is the area in this commercial. I don't think, but if you have a 7-foot, these are pretty good signage on these side roads for that. That's just something for consideration.
Yeah, and I like the idea that we just do this for this zone right now. What Scott's saying, we open it up too wide. I understand what Kim is saying, and I agree. However, we can deal with it zone by zone. And we can look at this and say, what's right for this zone, for WPI, if you will, and 2 signs, we could approve 2 signs. I'd probably recommend 6 feet rather than 7, but we can discuss that and make some decisions here, but my favor would be to do it by zone and to limit it.
I think I always favor consistency across the board. So if we're going to discuss this, I want to make sure that it's consistent in other commercial zones and that we have that all worked out for each area.
Well, I have the same concerns that the mayor does about Jurassic Taco and those others, but I think they come to us and we deal with those.
Well, no, the property, this is the property owner coming, traditionally you do it by building. Does that make sense? So they might have it per building. And so, and now they could, I guess, Jurassic Taco could say, hey, can I get my own sign? But you'd have to work with the property owner because it's on his property.
Exactly. Exactly. We deal with it by zone, the whole zone.
Councilmember Rodella, if I could ask a clarifying question. So consistency, there's a lot of ways we can be, to be blunt, there's ways you can be theoretically consistent, but actually you write the restriction in such a way that it only applies in one zone.
Exactly.
So we could write, you're allowed 1 off-premise sign as long as you are next to 5600 West. That's
Yeah.
Or is it more like you'd like, if we're going to allow like a single off-premise sign, we'd like to make sure that's actually a feasible option for all the other zones?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I think what Kim's saying, let's assume now you're going down Canal Boulevard and we don't allow any signs. I haven't seen a sign on Canal Boulevard, and yet we have now 2 commercial buildings going in that's going to have new tenants. We have a Costa Vida and the Arby's. Are we going to allow that same type of 7-foot sign there on Canal Boulevard?
And I mean, we have to take into account where the commercial property is versus residential property. But again, you can put that into a consistent ordinance change, you know, that it has to be certain footage away from residential areas, and it's just consistent across the board. I just want to make sure that all of our businesses are treated equally.
And it should be noted, the one on 5600, the city does not own the property and WPI does not own that property. And so this is something that the power company, we have an easement as a city. And so this is something the city would have to go work to advocate, you know, for this is something that's just, you know, that this is not, the developer can request, but we can't really, definitely, you know, if they can't get approved, we can't get approval from Rocky Mountain Power, or if they put other limitations, that also can change the decision here.
So Kim, when you say consistency, do you also mean then with across the street, what we approve for MNG?
I mean, you have MNG, you have the Point, you have the Arby's, the Costa Vida. I think they're, yeah, I mean, we can't approve one bigger sign for one area and a smaller sign for other, but at the same time, you have to take into account acreage, how big the commercial area is. And so when I say consistency, I mean consistency as in all businesses are treated equally and given the same amount of opportunities. It doesn't mean that one area gets a 7-foot sign and the other one is entitled to that same thing, even though they're by a residential area or they're just a smaller commercial zone. So just consistency across.
Well, and now you're going over to Highland Boulevard. We've got some warehousing over in Highland Boulevard. You go, it's all. This is why you start making a decision and all of a sudden it starts to expand.
Right.
I do know the owner of Arby's has talked to me several times about issues they've had trying to get traffic because they're behind that Costa Vida, and so people don't know and don't see where they're at, but they don't have a person like WPI advocating for them as well and knowing how to go about that. So we sometimes need to be advocates or a business as well.
Scott, do you have some?
Yeah, I just had a couple comments. I appreciate the comments that have been made by Ron and Councilman Rodell. I think you need consistency. I like the idea of consistency in different zones. I'm just a little nervous about, I want our businesses to succeed, but I think we want to be sure that we're trying to be consistent in how our city looks as well. So I just like that to take into consideration. And I don't think any monument sign should be taller than the shortest person on the council,
So are we gonna have someone reveal their height?
who, by the way, is getting shorter every year on the current council.
You've got your thing, get the height of the current council and go with that smaller. That's not probably a bad start.
Maybe you should do average, though. I mean, of all council combined, then average it out.
One thing that may be unique to this case is the off-premise notion of the sign. And so I think that's fair game. I like the requirements for off-premise signs that are listed in the agenda packet. Those seem like a really reasonable.
What you're saying,
So-
this is an extra sign for this shopping area. It's an off-premise, or that you have to understand. This is an additional signage for this area because they have it out front. These are the side signs, and that's, believe me, that request will now come in. You'll start seeing side signs on Alpine Highway. There's some businesses have it, but you'll start getting different requests, coming in from, hey, I'm here at Ace. I mean, I don't know if Ace might have a sign out front, but I'd be more worried about Ace being hidden than I am about Myers. I think most people know where Myers is at. I get worried about Ace. This is all of our businesses. I mean, it's hard. It's signage, they all need it, but we have to, then you go, well, what do we want our city to look like? That's where Scott's comments coming in going, well, hold it. We want them to succeed, but we also want to have the city look a certain way.
And I
a
do
hard one.
just have one thing to say. As a mom of 3 boys who climb on things, if that monument sign is higher, then kids can't climb on it and fall off it. I'm just saying right now, I support one that's a little bit taller.
But maybe they can climb it. They're looking for a climbing tower.
That's part. As long as they can't climb that sign, so if it's a little bit taller so they can't reach it, then that's what I'm.
That's what we put all the park in, so they can climb all over there at the park.
That's what I'm just throw it at the park, man.
Okay, guys, coming back, what would we like to see from on this WPI? Where I see a lot of different feelings here. Council, we're trying to get direction to be able to have a motion come back or an item that we can vote on in the future.
I am concerned about the site area on the eastern sign that we're looking at here. The west sign, the stop sign line is past the sign. But if I'm looking at that map correctly, that cars will be stopping basically right even with the sign on the eastern side. And I'm worried about northbound visibility for that. So I do want to make sure that we're really paying attention to that and being careful.
That was my first initial concern, was the safety of a sign can be a block. It's your view sign. Okay. Are you okay if they have signs in the west and the east?
I am okay with this proposal. I agree with what Kim's talking about, wanting to have something that is consistent across the city. I'm not completely opposed to signage that requirements that are unique to this zone, because I think, Ron, your point is well taken, that each zone is different, and so if we handle them differently, we can deal with it.
With the study what the impact would be if we broaden it beyond just this zone. This zone I can intellectualize and come to a decision on. Anything beyond that, I'd have to look at it, and that's all I'm saying.
Brittany, you want to share a little bit? You don't have to. I just wonder if you want to chime in.
I'm good.
Okay. Does the staff feel like they've gotten any direction?
Yes, I mean, it sounds like the council's potentially or tentatively in favor of some kind of amendment to allow limited off-premise signage where it's reasonable and in harmony with the city's code. What that is, I think you're going to want to see some options and how that could apply to other commercial zones in the city. So I'm hearing move ahead with an application, and we'll probably have to work back and forth. This will go to Planning Commission. It is a land use ordinance, so we'll also get their feedback on it and eventually bring it back to the council for a final decision. Either way.
So what we could do is have our city planner maybe work with it and then get you the documents. after
Yeah, I'll see if I
planning.
can find the city planner to talk to them.
So, okay,
I agree, well stated.
yeah, I think that helped us clarify. Okay, we'll now move on, since that was a discussion item. We're now going to this is communication items. It is 8:09. We are still hoping to be finished here shortly. It is item number 4A is park trails and sidewalks, snow clearing expectations, and Ridgeview maintenance agreement. And this will be Andy Spencer, and I believe you have Josh Castleberry that will maybe be helping us out here too.
Thank you.
As he's passing it out, I'm going to share an experience I had today. I was driving in the town center, and I went to go pull my car next to a truck, and I said, I don't want to park next to that truck. It looks a little beat up, and I didn't want to be by a beat-up truck. So I parked one space away, and when I got back and I looked, and it said Highland City on the beat-up truck. I'm going, okay. I get the point. Are you guys driving beat-up trucks where I'm parking?
So council members, Josh and I are going to stand up here, and first we'll go through why we're here. So over the holidays and over some of the snow events, there was some public feedback that came back that why doesn't Highland City clear various sidewalks around the city? I know that that was floating on some social media, et cetera. Additionally, as we're going to talk at the end, Boyers reached out to us relative to some of the areas that their expectations were that we would clear snow versus our expectations they would clear snow. So the combination of these, kind of building on, you know, we recall last meeting we approved a snow blower for Mountain Ridge, and we've now got the Mountain Ridge responsibilities for clearing. We wanted to go through with the council and help the council understand what our staffing allows us to do and how we go about clearing the snow and which days we clear on it. And quite honestly, those that we probably never really get to, and that's not through lack of effort, that's just through, we only have so much equipment, we only have so much staff that we maintain in the Parks Department in the wintertime. So put this together as kind of an order of priority. So for the most part, I'm going to, you know, just kind of hit the highlights, and then Josh actually is the one who directs all the crews and knows the little more finite detail, but there's a lot to go through, and if we get into finite detail, you know, we may be here for quite a long time. So just by reference, your page is basically organized as the front page is what we do when it first storms on any day, and the back page is, you know, the stuff that we hope to get to on the second day, but probably we don't get to a whole lot. And so we'll just kind of run through in order of priority. So if we look at any time at the snowstorms, and Josh gets a lot of credit for this, because when it snows on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, the person who clears most of the and let me back up a little bit. So our streets departments and our public works department clears, they have teams organized where they divide and conquer, and you know, you have a weekend team and a B weekend team, and they do all the snow with the bigger trucks and the bigger plows. The Parks Department does all of our smaller facilities, like our parking lots and all of our sidewalks. And so that's why we're focused on specifically the Parks Department here with this discussion. So anytime that it snows on Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, Josh is the first one reporting for the Parks Department, and he does the greatest share of it and calls in his team when needed on the weekends. But the primary focus are these facilities that we sit in here. So here at City Hall, Police Department, Fire Department, number one priority is the exit lanes for both the Police Department and the Fire Department, so that if there is an emergency, they can get out first. That's number one priority. From there, it's the community center. We clear those anytime it storms. Now, you know, if it's Sunday morning and it's storming, we probably don't scrape the sidewalks around City Hall. We'll clear the parking lots so the police department can operate. But we'll generally, you know, get that Monday morning before everybody gets in. But these facilities get cleared every day. Other than that, the city's policy has been, you know, preserve the labor, don't call in the teams, preserve the expenses. And so all the other areas that we're going to talk about are what we do on weekdays only. And when we say weekdays, the primary work week of the city, which would be Monday to Thursday. And Josh, I'm going to let you kind of take us through there and just kind of step through the way it goes and the way we divide the crews and the way we approach the city, if you're open to that. So.
After we leave the community center, that's pretty much where they conquer and divide from that point, depending on how many workers we have. At one point, we had 2 UTV Kubotas. If you weren't aware, we had an accident last year where one of them was hit. And so we've been waiting for a new one. So this year we've been down to 1, and the tractor we've been using as a substitute for that. So after they leave the community center, those 2 Kubotas go directly to trails. Trails have been a priority for quite a while because at one point it was a complaint from the open space fee. If I'm paying for my open space, why can't the trail be cleaned? They can't say that anymore, but that's kind of been the leader for that. So, and at that point, whatever crews are left, they usually hit the bathrooms. So we have a few bathrooms that are open in the winter. If you're not familiar, the trailhead below the high school, that bathroom's open. The trailhead at Mitchell Hollow is open, and Mountain Ridge Park is open, and Highland Glen on the north end is open. So usually after they leave there, they try to hit those bathrooms with, generally there's early morning runners, walkers, trying to get to those facilities. After there, they go to the sidewalk crossings that fall in the school zones that are on Parkway Detail property, which would be Freedom Elementary and Ridgeline. So we try to get those crosswalks open, and from that point on, they try to work out from that point to try to make those facilities open so the kids can get to those sidewalks from there. We have a few parking lots that are highlights after we leave the community center. We usually hit Heritage Park parking lot. That has a high amount of traffic for kids getting dropped off at the junior high, so we try to get that parking lot cleared. Then next, we've been using the Mountain Ridge Park to hit next, or whatever name we come up with, but there's lots of cutting through traffic right now, going through there to try to get in sooner. Then there's 2 parking lots at Mitchell Hollow. If you're not familiar, we have a parking lot on the north side, which gets used for a lot of the Murdoch Canal Trail, and then the Mitchell Hollow parking lot inside of it, they park there as well because the bathroom. And then Beacon Hills parking lot is super popular for sledding, so that would probably be our next parking lot as far as a priority. All of the trails pretty much get hit. Some of them, probably the first one would be the Town Center Metals Trail. If you're not familiar out here, it's probably one of our more popular from here to 6400 West. And then they kind of split up from that point as a crew. One of the Kubotas hits the south end, one hits the north end. Sometimes there's a little bit back and forth because the north end can get more snow and they tend to get stuck more. And if the Kubota gets stuck, really the only one that can get to it is another Kubota because it's on a trail down through a neighborhood. There's not really truck access, whatnot. So they'll kind of bounce back and forth and hit those areas and spread through the city. On a general storm, it takes us 1 day to get all of the trails.
So at this point, I just want to stop and interject. So with where we go, so we have 4 full-time parks crews, right? And then we take our seasonal employees or our part-time employees, and we take them down to 20 hours. Those that we keep over the winter. And this winter we had 5 employees over the winter, 2 of which are in college, so they kind of can only come a couple days a week, and the others we limit them to about 20 hours a week because our part-time employees can only get 1,500 hours a year, and so try to use the biggest bulk of that time in the growing season. And so on any one given day, if you will, if there's a snowstorm there, we have the 4 full-time employees, and we have probably, let's say, 2 to 3 seasonal employees right now. So it takes, Josh is in the truck usually, and he's doing all these parking lots and other miscellaneous clearing. It takes 2 of those employees to be on those 2 Kubotas, clearing the various trails, and then those other 2 to 3 employees that are in that day are doing the bathrooms and then the school areas, et cetera. So by the time we divide and conquer with the staffing that we'd have on a typical weekday, and by the time we just cleared everything that we just went through, that's the day, and we're about done for that day. And that's about the limits of our staffing and how far we get that day. So now we're going to skip you through day 2, because day 2 is the areas that people were posting about and complaining about. So,
Hey, Andy, I have a question for you and Josh.
Yeah.
So what were the complaints that people had? Was it specifically to trails, sidewalks, or?
it was the sidewalks. At least the one that I saw on social media was sidewalks on Alpine Highway.
So do you think if people just knew like the timeline of like, this is how it goes, then they'd have a better understanding, or is it something that you think we need to change even after they know that timeline?
Where we're going to ultimately go is if we really want to clear these sidewalks, then we've got to change. You know, I mean, if you really get down to it, because one of 2 things happens to us. Well, 2 or 3 different scenarios happen to us. One, the storm kind of keeps on through the night, and so we come the next day and we kind of touch up what we did the previous day. There's one scenario. Number 2, it stops snowing, but then it freezes overnight, and then all of these areas are somewhat frozen and hard as hard the next day. So we have a difficulty clearing them. Or 3, it kind of warms up, and the next day is fairly warm and the sun's out, and it's kind of clearing anyway. It wasn't a real heavy storm, and so within a couple days those sidewalk areas are cleared. But everything on the back side of this are the areas that we have a hard time getting to, because the first thing we do the next morning is we go and touch up or check on those critical facilities from the day before, right? And then we start working through these. But in one of those 3 scenarios, and so if it's a frozen scenario, they don't clear quite as well, but often we just don't make it to them again. And this is where these areas are the areas where you're getting your complaints.
So essentially you're wanting to know what type of service do we want, and if we want to have, golf grass, green grass service, then are we as a council wanting to up it, or are we okay with the service that we have and feel like that's okay?
Boiling down to the heart of it, you've hit it exactly. That's why we're giving this presentation, because we want you to understand what we can get to, what we can't, and what do you expect and what do we need to do. That's ultimately why you're getting this presentation. At the end of this, we're going to go to the Boyer and the maintenance agreement, kind of introducing what will be coming to you. But ultimately, that's where we're driving at is if this is something that you as a council feel we need to get to, and that citizens are saying, hey,
on that day 1.
why don't we ever get to it, then we've got to change our approach.
So as in hire more staff, or what are you thinking?
Which would mean more staff over the winter, and it would mean some additional equipment. Both.
What do you guys think?
Well, I think here's your problem with snow. We don't know when we get
Exactly.
it. We don't know how much, and so you've hired the extra employees to say, I'm ready to work.
Yeah.
I think, Josh, we say we have endless things, and this is just an assumption. People always assume parks does not have a lot to do during the summer. I mean, during the winter.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're not doing snow plows, let's assume we allocate more resources. Are there a lot of other projects? I mean, that would always be my concern. Okay, are we carrying staff during the winter, which is really their slower time, so they get to kind of have a little bit of a down. They're not, where the summer, we know that they're trying to get everything they can done.
And a lot of that, we're trying to balance when we can get our maintenance done on the equipment and get all that stuff taken care of, and that we're capitalizing on those days that they can't go out. Like today was the day they worked on equipment where it's raining. To be honest, in the morning they started with some pruning and did some of that stuff. I told them to prune till it rains, and then they went back and worked on equipment maintenance, trying to get the rest of our stuff with the regular maintenance and the fixing equipment that's broke. I mean, so they spent a lot of hours on equipment today.
I just think it's hard to, I mean, I know what services our residents want, but it's hard to hire more staff and buy more equipment for something you can't predict. It almost is, man, I wish we could just do volunteer snow day. Anyone who gets out there with a shovel and helps shovel city sidewalks gets free hot chocolate and donuts. I don't know what to do, like, because it's a tough way. You have people who expect more service, but at the same time, if you hire more and have equipment, and then you can have a winter that has no snow. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, that's
what they're thinking.
You're right. It's a balancing act, right?
Yeah.
And all of these areas that we don't get to often are the areas that don't really front somebody's house, right? So by ordinance, the items that are in 9 are really ones that people should clear. But if your home faces this way and you got a double fronted lot and you got a sidewalk behind you, even though it's not a parkway detail, you don't often get to it, right? All the sidewalks that go down the UDOT corridors are all, UDOT doesn't clear any sidewalks. They turn the maintenance of that over to the city. For the most part, in a general sense, they don't go in front of people's homes. I realize there are some that go in front of people's homes, but if we're saying generally they don't go across there. So, you know, at least based on the public feedback that we saw on some of the social media posts, there's some expectations to be clear.
Well, it's easy,
And,
but maybe we should have those people on social media pay a little extra tax because they have the expectation. I'm just being facetious.
Yeah.
But Rob, I have a question for you. What do we expect the residents? So I have snow out on my sidewalk. Am I supposed to clear it off in 24 hours? Could I get cited for it?
Yes, we do have a requirement that you're supposed to clear the sidewalk in front of your home, like you're supposed to maintain the park strip in front of your home. However, the city also does have a lot of spaces, parkway details, and another that are not, no resident kind of owns that section. I don't mean own and own, but owns the responsibility of maintaining that. And that has to fall to the city or in some capacity to take care of those areas.
Well, no, and I think as a city council, we're going to say, okay, are all trails going to be, is that the service during the winter? Are we going to make sure that they're all taken care of during the winter, or are we going to have priority? I think that's what you're saying. Here's our priority list.
Yeah,
How deep do you want us to go in our priority?
That's exactly it. How deep do you want us to go in our priority, and you know, how much do you want us to cover? It's not like we're opposed to going out the next day and covering them. If we're really going to cover the sidewalks in broad sweep, we're going to have to get something that clears them a little faster, like we talked about with our snow blower. I mean, it'll do a great job, but it's just kind of motoring along slowly. If you're going to do the sidewalks in general, you're going to need to get something like a side-by-side with a blade. It's thin enough. A lot of our sidewalks are either 4 to 5 feet, and you've got to be able to kind of make some headway, so to speak, because these are long corridors.
Well, I thought we approved the last city council meeting, one of those
We did.
grasshopper that
Yeah.
has that little thing. So I thought we kind of did
Yeah.
approve some snow.
Yeah, you did, and we're going to use that at Mountain Ridge, and we're going to use it here, and we'll go as far as we can go with it.
Can we
But-
keep
but
approving that? Like when we have mowers break down and we have to buy a new one, can we just buy that instead of the new mower?
Yeah, might be able to look at inventory, adding to our inventory there
Yeah.
with the different kinds. It's always a question of how much, how quick, how soon. The thing is with the snow blower, if you will, I don't know the top speed of the snow blower, so I'm just going to say it's 5 miles an hour because I have no idea. But the snow blower goes 5 miles an hour, and something like a side by side, we can clear it 15 miles an hour. I don't know. I don't want to get the police chief upset at me either. I'm just trying to do a relative proportion, and so you can just cover some ground with it, if you will, a little faster. But for our part, on the public works side, all we want to do is match the level of expectation from the council and citizens with the level of service that we deliver. And we received some feedback this winter that, at least from some, that they weren't happy with that level of service. So that's why we're having this.
That's our question. I mean, you talk about side-by-sides. I'm going, okay, I go buy a side-by-side. I get on KSL and I go buy a used one to make sure it has a blade. I just spent $2,000. The city, we're talking 10.
Yeah.
I just do this to FYI.
That's the way it works.
Scott.
Yeah, I'd just like to, as I've sat here and thought about this, first of all, I want to thank the staff for all you do. I think the top priority when we have storms, and they're hard to predict, we have had a month and a half now of quite a bit of storm. Fortunately, a lot of it's been rain. But I could not get out of my neighborhood to go to work unless you folks came in on 9910 and cleaned it, and you always do, and I appreciate that greatly. We're responsible for the rest of the roads, but you know what? We managed to get through those roads even if they're not cleaned, but we can't get up the hill. So thank you so much. and I appreciate it. And I like the way you prioritize. But I think as a whole, and I agree 100% with what Councilwoman Rodella's been saying, because it's common sense. I think we have to temper expectations. And maybe we need to kind of encourage these people that are complaining to get out and do a little bit of service.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to complain on social media. It's much different to get out and do a little service yourself and clean your own sidewalk. Because one, we don't have the staffing, nor do we have the financing to clean every sidewalk in the city every time it snows. It'd be great if we could, but we can't afford it. So the people sometimes, they want all these services and they want to be really particular, but they don't want to pay for them. And that's the American way, which is unfortunate, isn't it? I mean, we want all this stuff, but we don't want to pay for it. So if we're not willing to pay for it, then I'd say let's encourage people to get out and help. But I think the top priorities, in my opinion, are the roads. And then I think, if possible, the main trails and some of the heavily used sidewalks along the main corridors. But I don't know how you're going to clean every sidewalk in Ridgeview. I don't know how you're going to clean all the rest. I think you do a great job. And I think sometimes we get too obsessed with people that complain constantly on social media, because a lot of times it's just an echo chamber for people that they complain, but they don't have any solutions. So I'm sorry for saying that. But,
So
yeah.
I like what Scott says, and I just want to say, number one, maybe when we switch out older like mowers and stuff like that, we look into something that can be dual purpose. And then number two, do a social media campaign every time it snows. Get out, let's help.
Help us.
Everyone help out. It's a big snowstorm. Get out there and do sidewalks kind of thing.
And let's
I don't know.
educate people what's available and what isn't. Let's be realistic.
And then I also think we should have this as part of our larger budget discussion, because I know you're going to need somebody else to help take care of Mountain Ridge, and that would give you an extra body in the winter also. So I think maybe part of it is a bigger discussion than this. But also, I wanted to say thank you, because there was so much worry about the bus stop at the bottom of our hill and the salt storage center that's right there. And I've never seen you guys there when there's a bus picking up or dropping off. And I know that was a huge concern. And I know that takes scheduling on your part, so thank you. Can I ask a question since we have Josh here? Josh, how is the new park holding up? I know it's gotten lots of use. Have any of those pieces that I predicted would break first broken yet, or are we good?
We're pretty good. There's things that I didn't think about that, like food. Like, I don't know if you've seen the playground some days after a busy day, but there is mass amount of crackers, goldfish, stuff like that you don't think about. And I'm like, I don't know, like.
We could have dog days.
Our rats, we could just say we have a thing of rats.
Well, Disneyland does kittens. That they do cats. Disney. They have the cats come out at night and eat all the food and the rats. No joke about it.
Anyway, we're joking, but you're saying we're starting to see.
Yeah, so I'm concerned, like, when we get to summer, like, how bad that gets. Like, right now, it gets a ton of trash, and whether it's food, gummy stuff, all that stuff, and then the rain comes, like, because since it's rained, like, every 3 days, then the rain comes, and I'm assuming it's washing into the surfacing, it kind of disappears a little bit, but, so there's some things like that I worry about.
So I'm going to kind of get us back a little bit on topic with this. What do we do with snow removal? Are we removing it off the pickleball courts? Are we removing it off the playground area? I mean, it's too busy there.
We can't remove it off of the surface of the pickleball. It'll ruin the surface of the pickleball. So we just let that melt with the colors underneath. It helps it melt a little faster. Maybe you've been asked. I've been asked several times if the basketball court's heated or the pickleball courts are heated. I've seen several people go out and put their hands on it and say, yeah, it's heated. I've had to tell people, no, it's not. But there's a lot of assumptions out there that we have heated facilities with that.
Welcome to Highland.
Yeah, so we were really going to take the nets down. I'm glad that we haven't taken the nets down, because the snow didn't really last long enough. I don't know that we would have been able to get them back fast enough for people, because Saturday it was crazy, Monday was crazy, so a lot of it's getting a lot of use. It'll be impressive to see what happens once it comes to summer. I mean, on a few of the 1 week we had the 50s, a pretty good stretch of the 50s, I know we had to dump the garbage cans 3 times there, and that was the middle of winter.
you have a solution to the snack problem?
To the food?
Yeah.
I don't, because I'm not sure signs are going to work.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the best answer for that right now.
Have you seen any vandalism over there yet?
The bathrooms have been toilet papered, like the ceilings, a few times.
How do you
When you're talking like wads, right?
Yeah, the wads, the ceiling. I mean, Mountain Ridge is a closed campus,
I'll freaking talk to my kids again.
but but there's a lot leaving at lunchtime to go over there. That's probably one of my biggest concerns is the junior high kids going over there. I've had a few words with a few of them. What do you want to call it? The glider. That one, they put the smallest kid on and then run to the end as fast as they can. I've stopped them several times on that and asked them, like, hey, you really don't want to have to buy this. Like, it's way too expensive. I mean, just treat it with some respect. But that's the hardest part, I think, right now. The junior high, the kids are leaving lunch to go over there. They're probably the most destructive as far as that goes. But overall, like, the little kids using it, I mean, they're loving the playground. It's just that middle junior
So
high
going
age.
back to our snow removal, do we have, I'm trying to look, I know you said school areas, so do we look at the natural walking areas for kids walking to school and we try to make, like we have Mountain Ridge, now that we actually have a sidewalk on both sides, I imagine there's gonna be a little bit more walking there, so we're making sure that's closed. I mean,
Yeah,
we have Ridgeline Elementary, we're gonna talk about Ridgeview, which I always assume is that more homes come in, you're gonna have more walkers going to high school. Does that make sense?
So that's, yeah. So really, we get those crosswalks first, and then at like 10-400, then we start to work out from those crosswalks to let the kids get in there. Mountain Ridge, Ridgeline, that gets way bigger, and there's some trails a part of that, but you start going to the west to Highland Boulevard, and then across Highland Boulevard and down the first street, because we get complaints from that side coming from that way. So we try to get those areas and work out. We do realize Mountain Ridge will be lots of kids walking to school, so the sidewalk out there will be very important, and hopefully the snow blower and all that will work, so that we can get that facility cleaned. And really, some of it's timing, because like if we don't hit it right away and it gets frozen, it just makes it 5 times as hard to.
Just like our house.
I like what's been said by Scott and Kim in particular, and I agree with it with one caveat, and that is there any liability on, let's say, North County Boulevard or Beacon Hill Boulevard? We don't clear it and there's an accident. Is there potential liability to the city?
Potential, yes. It's same thing as kind of any other public improvement we may have. Think of a sidewalk. If we know that a sidewalk, say is separated because roots have lifted up a panel and someone could trip and hurt themselves on that, and we knew about it, there's a potential risk of liability. It's more about, did we know there was some dangerous condition out there and we failed.
Are you aware of any adjudication against a municipality for not clearing sidewalks?
Cities get sued all the time.
Okay.
Businesses get sued, cities.
For sidewalks are a main one, especially, sometimes it's ice. I've seen it more with the uneven steps where someone's walking on it. Or
Yes,
it's
and that
not.
one makes sense, actually. But clearing the sidewalk, in reality, I clear mine, and very often it turns to ice. It's more dangerous when it's ice than when it's got 4 inches
So Rob,
of
let's
snow on
focus
it.
back on what Ron's question is about legalities. Is there certain things we need to look at? Is there certain things there's an assumption that if we don't do it, we have a higher litigation aspect?
So there is a level of risk of, are we being negligent in maintaining this? To some regard, if you see a completely uncleared sidewalk, you can assume that's a little bit less safe of there and you probably shouldn't walk there. The concern maybe there's an area that we know will pool with water as it melts during the day, then refreezes at night. That'll become more of like a black ice type situation. Those are the type of things where, if, it's because we don't clear it, it becomes that kind of risk, and it's kind of a recurring thing that the chances of the city's liability goes up. But you're on the mill, you see a sidewalk that's just full of snow. It's like, well, I know there's snow there. There's a cleared, obstacle to me walking there. I'm choosing to take that risk on a little bit less, but it's hiding this is one talking about the uneven sidewalk. It's uneven, but it's covered up by the snow in a way they can't see, or sometimes there's like a hole, or maybe the sidewalk meanders in a way, and it's hard to find because it suddenly drops off to the side, and they couldn't find where the sidewalk was. Maybe there's a bit more. I mean, Highland's been operating for how many years? We haven't had this issue come up, but it is a potential.
That's the only caveat that
As a
I don't know if it
consideration.
changes anything at this point, but we ought to at least consider what impact that would have as far as liability.
Just real quick, on the priorities. First of all, I like the priorities. Would it make sense to take a map of the city that's probably black and white to start with and overlay those priorities in color coding so that we can put those up on the website and make it more visible and more understandable to residents? Because I think you're right, that it's the expectation is the
Yeah. I mean,
the
we have
issue.
a similar map on our website as far as for roads to explain to people. Okay,
Right.
we clear the collectors first. So you're absolutely right. To identify priorities would help set a public expectation. So I think that's a very good idea. Council, if there's any other comments, I don't want to leave that. Otherwise, I just wanted to come to Ridgeview and talk a little bit about Ridgeview. So in some discussions with Boyer, particularly focusing on snow on Canal Boulevard, their expectation was that the city was doing the snow. Our expectation was that they were doing the snow. And I did see their maintenance crews actually shoveling it the other day. So I think for this winter, they're doing it when it's really bad. But what we are proposing and working on with Boyer, and these are some early notes and an early map, is areas where their HOA will clear the snow and do the landscape maintenance, and areas where the city will do the landscape maintenance. So by discussion in council meetings and inferred agreements, I guess, because we don't have an official agreement yet. We take care of everything on North County Boulevard. We take care of 10100 North. They are agreeing that they'll take care of the landscape maintenance on Canal Boulevard, but they're asking that we do the snow on the sidewalks on Canal Boulevard. We already do the snow on the streets on the Canal Boulevard. They're saying that the HOA will take care of the snow on all the interior roads. Even some of those are public. A number of the lots front the public streets, and so that would be just like any of your homes. But those that don't, like around the HOAs and things, the HOA would clear those sidewalks.
Well, they're the owners of that they're an owner of the property around it.
The HOA is the owner of the property, but there's one collective HOA there, right? And so they would clear all of those. Again, if we sign an agreement and kind of formalize this, there's probably a higher level of expectation from those neighborhoods and that HOA that, hey, you guys are going to clean these sidewalks. As Public Works, I think it's a good thing for us to sign this agreement because I think it's a good thing for us to delineate the maintenance responsibilities now while everybody still remembers. Because if we get down 10 years down the road and Boyer owns some long-term hold properties there, so they'll probably always be involved to some extent, but the players have changed. It's possible the HOA would be back saying, hey, why are we maintaining Canal Boulevard? Why are we spending our HOA dollars maintaining that landscape out there? And I think that it would be good to formalize all these things in an agreement. So I think that coming to an agreement here and having a formal agreement is a good thing because it'll solidify those memories as we look down the road. But that is one thing they're going to be asking, and like I said, once it's in agreement, the expectation will rise for that to be clear.
So Andy, can you spell out so we have, I think it's orange.
Yeah, orange is the area that Boyer's asking that we clear the snow, if you will. This is the map they provided us as an initial discussion piece, just obviously, with highlighters. And we've exchanged some comments on it. It just was the piece that I had to show to the council tonight as kind of a discussion piece. But they're asking that we clear all the snow on all the areas that are highlighted with orange. And then they would do all the areas that are highlighted with pink. And again, I think they missed some of those frontages on the kind of like Featherstone and some of these other main roads that border the HOAs that nobody fronts on, that those HOAs would need to clear. But they are indicating that they would do the landscape maintenance as far as the weeding and the mowing, et cetera, on Canal. They just would ask that we do the snow clearing on Canal.
So other than Canal, who does the maintenance? So we have a parkway detail along North County.
That's us.
So we are naturally mowing and taking, if there's sprinkler breaks, we take care of that.
Right.
Over,
Just like all
off
the other-
of, is it
except for
11?
I should say, except for the commercial areas. Throughout the city, even though there's parkway details in front of the commercial areas, we don't maintain the commercial areas, frontages, because that's generally almost always just integrated with their landscape, the sprinklers, et cetera. And so, like in front of the two commercial pods, we would anticipate that those commercial pods would do them. But all the other residential areas, we do it.
And are we going to be maintaining the grass up by the high school, the road along there? Do we?
Yeah, that one's doesn't have any grass there, but
That's
does have
It's xeriscape.
xeriscape. But yeah, we'll maintain the xeriscape and the sprinklers and everything on 10100 North, which is the road south of the high
At
school.
Canal Boulevard, they're going to be mowing, and maintaining the.
They'll mowing and maintain the sprinklers, and they'll do the weeding in the beds and the spraying, et cetera. But they're saying they'll maintain the landscape there, just not the snow on the side.
Is it the same HOA on the south side of?
It's all my understanding, and not that I pretend to know all things Ridgeview in that regard, but my understanding is that it's one master HOA.
Yeah.
And so they all, even like say all the Ivory lots that are up in the northwest, they all pay into a HOA fee because they all help collectively maintain the private park and some of the other open spaces.
I would strongly encourage that any future development we do that requires this kind of an agreement, that agreement be made at the time we're doing the plat agreement and everything else, because that's when we have more leverage. At this point, I mean, they want something from us and they're likely to more give us something if we say you need to maintain that on Canal Boulevard, because I could argue it both ways. It's not their traffic, 80% of the time, 90% of the time, it's just a through boulevard there. But the other side of it is that it's in the middle of their development and they're HOA on both sides of it. So I can argue both sides. And I like the idea that they're doing the landscaping, but in the future, I hope that we do these agreements really early in the process before they even get approval for the plat.
So Scott, to me, that comes, what do you feel the understanding was when this agreement was put together? Both of us were there, but what do you understand? I know Canal Boulevard, the county kind of put in MAG, but Canal Boulevard, but all the landscaping and everything the HOA put in. What's been your understanding on this?
My understanding of the agreement?
Or about snow removal and things like that?
You know, I don't remember it ever being discussed.
It never was. Ron, to be honest, it wasn't even on our radar.
It wasn't on our radar. We never discussed it. And so I think Ron's concerns that maybe, we've learned from this and going forward, but it was never discussed. I mean, they talked about the landscaping. We knew the road would become Highlands Road. We assumed that we'd be clearing the snow on that. There was never discussion about cleaning sidewalks. And so, I think there wasn't a discussion, so we're having to do it now.
So, Andy, I think it doesn't seem like this is too overly burdensome, but my question would be, where would these sidewalks fall in your priority list? Because I don't think that we would want to guarantee that you take care of their sidewalks in higher priority than you would other city sidewalks.
So Rob, this brings up a question. If we now have an agreement to clear that sidewalk, does it not raise it up on our priority list because there's an agreement?
Yep.
Yes, because depending on what we put into that agreement, how often we maintain it, or if we just say we will keep it clear of snow, then there's some reasonable level that whenever it snows, someone's going to be down there clearing it from them, and that's the HOA or whatever entity is the contracting party with the city could, as a contract matter, come for the city and say, hey, you're supposed to be doing this for us.
But can you put a timeline, like within 48 hours or 72 hours of a snowstorm?
We could. 72 hours once it rises above 50 degrees outside.
I think it should just fit in our priority list. Like wherever that would normally fit in our priority list, that's when they get shoveled.
You could name it, it fits in the same priority as the mayor's sidewalk in front of his house where the city does it.
Well, that's perfect.
And I just want
yes.
to tell the city, you've been doing a great job.
So that's
It's
number.
a joke. They've never cleared my sidewalk.
It's like number 13 on the list here.
I read that somewhere.
Oh, I want it. I don't think my road's cleared any sooner than anyone else's. So, but with it, Rob, one of the questions I would have then, let's assume this sidewalk here in front of this area starts to deteriorate. Who's responsible to replace that sidewalk?
There's a great question for Rob, because generally, most city ordinances, and I'm going to start in front of your house. So start in front of your house, most city ordinances, and I'm talking cities as a general, are going to say you as the resident are responsible to take care of the sidewalk in front of your house. What does take care of the sidewalk in front of your house mean? Does it mean fix the deteriorated sidewalk, et cetera? Our insurance carrier, when we met with them 18 months ago, this is from the trust, expressed to us, because I asked this very question, and they expressed to us that at least their findings and their dealings with the different cities that they insure, just basically every city through the state, I think, is that it's not that easy for the cities to completely wash their hands of the maintenance of the sidewalks, and say, oh, it's in front of your home, it's your care responsibility. But I have also been part of, in prior cities that I worked for, where somebody had tripped on a raised sidewalk, and they were suing the resident that owned the home because there was a care responsibility there, and so they were suing their homeowner's insurance essentially for that. But the trust kind of said to us that and then this is general knowledge of city maintenance in general, that the city needs to have a plan and a program for maintaining those, and that we can establish priorities, and we can get to the worst first and the most dangerous first, but as with most government activities, because what the city holds and owns is vast, we can only chip at it so fast. But ultimately, when the sidewalks degrade on the public roads, there is, especially those roads that don't front anybody, there's an expectation the city's going to take care of those and fix those.
10 years ago, they were doing work on the street in front of my house, and I have like 200 feet frontage there and 100 feet. It's a corner lot, and probably 25 sections of sidewalk and 8-foot sections, I think. And I went to the workers who were working on the street and said, hey, if I buy the concrete, will you guys take out and pour new sidewalks for me? And the answer was no, but we'll replace them for you. And they replaced them. They replaced like 20 out of 25. The others were smooth, didn't have any cracks. And I was absolutely astounded. I've never heard of a city doing that in a private residence sidewalk. I had heard of the other. In Maryland, that's what we did. A sidewalk, the owner paid for the concrete, but all the work was done by the city. That's just for whatever information that's worth. I know that Highland did that in front of my house 10 years ago.
I gotta make a comment. Thanks, Ron, for your comments. I think, on this plan, basically, I agree to it. I think the top priority probably would be cleaning along Canal Boulevard, because I think a lot of the residents in that neighborhood probably use those sidewalks to access the Murdoch Canal Trail. As for along North County and up on 10100, I'm not sure the usage. I guess when it's developed, there'll be some people going along there, maybe jogging and things, but I know as a fact that no student at Lone Peak would be caught dead being seen walking to school. And so I think that's not a higher priority as the other one, getting people down the trail.
I mean, I think we ought to, if we're trying to do an agreement, let's talk about sidewalk replacement.
Cover the full gamut.
Yeah, if we're going to do it, so okay, at the time when the sidewalk, hey, we'll take care of the snow, but when it comes up, you're responsible. There is one caveat. I mean, when they did do this subdivision, just Ron, they did agree the park in the middle was a public park. No, that, I think that was even part of the motion. It was approved. They agreed to. I think it was in the agreement. I'm just saying there is some negotiation if we need to do some negotiation. Because we recognize the HOA is taking care of that park. And so, but I'm just, on something. I mean, what's unfortunate, like when you're talking about, Ron, we thought that down there where David Weekley was at, when it was pitched to the city council, we thought that was it could be a senior project. That was senior housing. Now, we've caught on that there were special, that the wording, because Highland's not done a lot of type of development like this is where our greatest risk was. We're not used to some of these agreements. We have not had a lot of HOAs. I think this is one of the first HOAs probably in 20 years that came into the city. I mean, I think Sky Ridge was the,
Right.
I mean, you're just going, we have not had a lot of HOAs. And so this is something, it's new, it's new ground. Our HOAs take care of their own roads. I mean, you got Scott's HOA, they do everything. And so, I mean, this is a little different HOA agreement that we're even entering, because they do have a major road going through their HOA.
Yeah, that's one, probably a uniqueness is the level of facility that Canal Boulevard is. I mean, that's a collector road for the city and
Do we
carrying a lot of traffic.
Do we plow Featherstone? Is the city responsible to plow Featherstone?
Yeah, we plow the public roads as far as like the road clearing. We'll plow all the public roads in here just like we would every other public road. Those are dedicated to the public. It really comes down to who's maintaining the landscape adjacent to those and who's maintaining the.
I think they'll do the landscape. We do the snow, but I think we have to give the expectation of what level they're at, so that we're not getting a call to into that. Because I think, okay, you're going to be at the same level. We have this sheet. You're going to be at the same level as this subdivision here, so they can't. I want Ron, Rob, is it good to kind of be that vague that hey, when we hit this subdivision, we expect to be hitting yours too, but we're not going to be held at hey within 24 hours. Illegally, and that we're going to also have this. They're going to be calling us saying, "Hey, you didn't get me in 24 hours." Yeah. I think that's what the council's been saying, correct?
Right. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thanks for your service.
We're close to 9, guys.
5 minutes. We got 5 minutes. You get 1, 2, 3,
Okay.
4.
Yeah, we have a couple. We do have a couple of things. We have Doug is passed out. We have item number 4B, which is beautification committee. Doug has sent out some things. I think he has some very good. Now, what Doug's going to discuss, I think, comes in with a lot of other committees that we have here in the city, and I'm sure Rob can maybe kind of fill in. But let's have, Doug has this on here. His assignment's been beautification committee, and so maybe we can kind of discuss that and what you found out, because I think you found some interesting things about some of our committees and how they function.
Yeah, just a quick. First of all, there are 5 major programs that the beautification committee handles: Yard of the Month, community garden boxes, backyard tours as part of the fling, flowers around the cemetery pavilion, and the Adopt a Patch program, which has really kind of died out during COVID and hasn't come back. And with Carrie stepping down as chair of the committee, I think it's a good opportunity to look. The documents I sent out and distributed this evening, in 2014, the beautification committee was set up as an ad hoc committee of the city. And ad hoc committees are, per code, municipal code 412020. They're created to deal with a specific issue which is anticipated to have a short duration. They generally deal with a single topic, and once a solution or recommendation is arrived at, they report to the full city council, and then the committee is dissolved. Sorry.
So are you thinking that this should not be an ad hoc committee?
I'm thinking it probably should not be an ad hoc.
That's exactly
committee.
my first thought.
There are 3 options that immediately come to mind for me.
It's not a short-term thing. We
Right.
don't want it to be anyway.
Right. The one, we could decide that it was an ad hoc committee. It has met its needs, and we dissolve it. We could continue it as is. That option doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Or we could create it as a permanent committee of the city, and just kind of looking for thoughts.
What's your suggestion, Doug, since you have experience in this?
I like creating it as a permanent committee. I think there are things that the committee does that we want to do. And if we don't have a beautification committee to do it, we're going to have to find some other way of accomplishing them.
I'm good with that.
I agree.
So the recommendation, this would be a committee that would consist of 7 resident volunteers, correct?
Yeah, I think we could use the same rules that were originally in that ad hoc committee. That seems reasonable to me.
Unfortunately, when our committee chair over this beautification committee, I think we all saw an email where we had Carrie, who'd been doing a great service for the city with some other commitments that have come up, has had to kind of step back away. So we would be looking for, we'd have to find a chair and other committee members. Doug would maybe kind of head that up. So everyone's in favor of having this now become a formal city committee that we will then seek out residents to have a chair. Doug would be on that and would report back to the city council.
What happens if we can't get any volunteers? Because we have that issue with the Historical Society.
The Historical Society, I actually interviewed a person that would like to take over as the chair there.
Oh my
And
gosh.
she's very qualified.
Oh, nice.
So actually someone else. It's been there for a year. Actually, yeah, I have an application for a person. I talked with them. They have actually been working with Charlie. They helped get a lot of things uploaded on the website. They've lived here for quite a long time. They are, I think that they would bring about some good things. We will miss Charlie. I think they would like to work with Charlie during a transition. They don't feel like they can just step in. They'd have to have Charlie's help.
Well, I hope they get us to give them a place to put all of their historical.
If you can make sure.
Yeah, I hope they give us a place so they can put all of their artifacts and different things that they have. Because it's not being displayed, and it's tragic.
Oh, and I talked with them about maybe bringing it out during the fling. That maybe at the fling we could have a booth where they have. Anyway, let's talk about this beautification committee. Anything else, Doug, that you need to?
Only other thing I've got is with regard to your question, Kim, about what if we can't find volunteers.
Yeah.
I think that we go out, we look, and we find volunteers. If we can find enough to form a committee, then we move forward with setting up as a permanent committee. If we can't, then we
Dissolve.
punt.
If it's okay with the council, I actually had a resident that grabbed me tonight about some beautification questions, and they were willing to actually donate. I'd like to invite Brad Walton maybe to come up. Brad lives in the Bull River area with his good wife, Linda, who gave our opening prayer. So, Brad, what's your feeling on this beautification committee?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm Brad Walton. I've been a resident of Highland for the last 33 years. We live in Bull River. And what I had talked to the mayor about just beforehand was that on Highland Boulevard, going north of SR 92, there are several islands, concrete islands, that have never been finished along there. It appears that it's just been abandoned. I mean, it's a terrible appearance for an entrance into our city.
Am I wrong in assuming that was to be done by the because maybe that's an enforcement issue.
The developer, at least a couple of them that are in the vicinity of Highland Hideaway Storage, they've committed to us with their last building that they're building this spring. They'll be finishing the landscape in those. But there is the kind of undeveloped lot between the church and Hideaway Storage that still needs it to be added. And so there is a commitment from the developer to those that are finished, and we do have an applicant investigating the lots between the church and the storage, and so there may be some future there.
But you're thinking that this spring that the developer there would help us. What Brad's talking about is some of those areas on Highland Boulevard that just, I mean, it looks like they're missing something. They're just kind of
there are concrete curbs on each side of the island, and nothing has been filled in between. It
looks trashy.
12 to 18 inches deep, and it fills with trash and weeds.
The reason why I brought Brad up, to me, this is beautification.
That's right.
And so.
Well, it is, but it's also enforcement.
It is.
To the developer. We've got to have an ability to have some teeth, Rob, in getting the developer to do what they say they
Well, the problem is that they haven't developed those properties in front of those medians, essentially. There's gaps there, and that's why there's gaps there.
Well,
what's your feelings on
Well,
this,
and
Brad?
those are all valid concerns, but it's been this way for over a decade.
Yeah.
It looks terrible. I have several neighbors who have come to me and said, why don't we do something for the city? to not be a negative Facebook group like we heard about for snow removal. We would like to bring a solution.
Thank you.
And Andy and his team graciously supplied the residents along Dry Creek last year with sand and bags for making sandbags and making the area safe. And we're really grateful for that. That solved a big problem. But that made me think, is there some way to fix these islands on Highland Boulevard? I have commitments from several of our neighbors that we would be willing to pay for the gravel or the stone, the aggregate, to fill those remaining sections of islands with stone if the city would be willing to install the stone. Just deliver and fill those islands. We would take care of the cost of that. That's our proposal for that. I would like to get it done because every day I drive past that, I think, this isn't how my home looks. I'm sure this isn't how the mayor's looks or any of the council members looks. It's just an eyesore, and I would like to help fix that.
Okay, we have our first volunteer for the beautification.
Yeah, and it's 9:06, and so.
So we'll have you work with Andy, but Doug, would you mind this? I know I've known Brad for years.
Absolutely, yes. I will definitely be in touch.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
we'll
I'll get
take
you
up on
my
your
contact
offer.
info.
So council, am I okay to say we'll take him up on his offer, the kindness offer, they'll give it, and then we'll work with the city to kind of get that out there, and then
I'll work with Andy,
and then you can help us on some other beautification in the city.
So
I would
real
encourage.
good possibility. It's a passion for my wife and myself. We pick up a lot of trash along SR 92 in our streets, and so we would like to help.
I would encourage Andy to involve the developer in this to see if there's anything he can contribute. And I'd also like, this fits the xeriscape that we're requiring right now. But if it's gravel, can't we put in a little bit of foliage? And
We would probably want that.
yeah, so it's not just bare gravel, that we'd have xeriscape that includes, some plants and some foliage, so.
some low plants.
But I would involve the developer in that, that's giving us
Don't
a
let them off
promise.
the hook. Let them kind of. maybe
Yeah,
help us.
I don't want to
But-
let them off the hook. I think this is fantastic. I mean, you're the hero of the night for me.
Well, I don't know about that.
Serious, you're the hero
Brad,
of
thank
the
you for
night.
being willing and stepping forward to come up with a solution versus a complaint.
Yeah,
Sure.
Thank you.
I
Sure.
go by it and I just cringe. I hate it when I drive by there, and I've got to go there to.
I feel the
make
same
sure.
way. It's just an eyesore, and
Yeah,
we'd like to fix
it's
that.
an eyesore, but I would like to not let the developer off the hook.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank
Hey,
you, Mr.
Doug,
Mayor.
is there anything else on this beautification that you're needing?
No, I don't need anything else at this point.
So we're now going
Yeah, you
to
could
we'll move
suggest
forward with the form committee. Okay, let's go back. Now we have on, and I apologize. I thought we'd be done by 9, but we are at 9:06. So number 4C, which is general plan amendment, 4800 West. Andy.
Very quickly, Mayor and Council, just a reminder, there is a neighborhood meeting that is being held tomorrow evening here at 7 o'clock. That is to discuss potential impacts to the individual properties of those who would be infected by that. And so those that will be attending are those that received a direct invitation from the city, and certainly the council received an invitation that way. But the intent of that meeting is to just really be able to talk to those that will be affected, and what does this mean for my home, if you will.
Okay, thank you on that. The next one is budget updates. Aaron.
Okay, so these are actually just some meeting dates that I need your help setting, Mayor and Council. So it was brought to my attention that one of you has a conflict on Wednesday, April 24th. We intended to have a budget work session that day. Can we push it forward 1 week to try to keep it on a Tuesday, as is traditional anyway with our meetings, to April 30th? So that's a 5th Tuesday. Does that, or is that any conflicts for anyone?
So what day specifically? April 16th?
So no, moving to Tuesday, April 30th.
April 30th.
Oh,
Yes.
Everybody look good there?
at this time I'm good.
Okay, we'll move that. We'll probably do a 6 o'clock since it's a work session. Okay. So canceling the 24th, meeting that previous Wednesday and moving it to the 30th. Okay, 2 more to go. Traditionally, our city open house is 2nd to 3rd week in May, just kind of bumps a little bit every year. we're trying to avoid Hope of America and graduations that come up at the end of May. So our proposal is to do the city open house Wednesday, May 8th. And looking at the calendars, that's the day that there is not Hope of America for our schools, at least in Highland. And then we would do the following week, that Wednesday, we would do kind of the formal budget presentation so the 8th is the party, where a lot more fun kind of a situation, whereas the 15th, it's a formal presentation that we normally have like the TV set up, and we do a presentation to residents who kind of want to dive in a little bit deeper to the budget. So would May 8th and May 15th be okay for those meetings?
Yes.
Is everyone else?
Okay. Well, that was easier than I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
And then that following week is graduation, so now we've avoided that week, which I appreciate, and I think others do as well. So, okay, those are our new meetings. Skip over that one. Mayor, legislative
Okay,
updates.
let's just hit real fast on legislative updates. As we looked at, these are some of the bills that we've been tracking for a little bit. Our public safety bill, which is SB 367, seems to be moving forward. Seems to work out, everything's good there. Some of the ones that we've really been watching is HB 465, and then I believe there was another one that popped up on the agenda today. Was that one was in the 500? Was it 572? Is the one on the PTIF money. Okay, so those who are not aware, HB 0572 is this bill directs the state treasurer to invest into the Utah Home Investment Program. And what this, in a sense, does is take city funds that we have put with the state treasurer and allows them to do it towards infrastructure for a home building, that builders can go and take a loan from this to try to bring the cost down, to try to keep the cost of the homes down for first-time home buyers. I think they have to meet, the developers have to meet a certain criteria on
60% of the properties, if we do a higher density to allow this, 60% of the properties that have to be a first-time home buyers with a 5-year deed restricted.
Correct.
Occupancy.
This is one they've been
loan.
talking about. So if they move out within 5 years, the home cannot be rented. So 60. So did they see how many units per acre was it? I can't remember.
Well, it was up to 30, which would be the townhomes. So, yeah, quite honestly,
Well,
I like.
think 30 units was SB 268. This one doesn't
you're
say
right.
it.
That's right. You're right.
Okay.
You're right.
Anyway, trying to save time. Guys, we have the legislators till March 1st. So really, this is a really critical week to watch for bills. That if something comes up, we will try to get a hold of you to say, hey, like last year, we had a bill that popped, I think it was on a Wednesday afternoon, and it was going to be heard by Thursday morning. And we had to grab and get a hold of any legislator, any lobbyist, anything we could to try to get that. That was that Blue Bison bill where in a military bill, it was talking about roads and military bases. All of a sudden, they put about a connection in a city, and it was kind of hidden. And we had to grab and try to get that pulled out of that bill by that next Thursday, because most wouldn't look at a military bill worrying about what's in a military. They'd all just say yes, but that was snuck in. So we've got to watch, and if that happens, it's all hands on deck. I had another meeting today during the league thing. I had a Chamber of Commerce executives thing that they were going through. Ron, Kim, anyone else?
I had one question. Does anybody know where the micro schools bill is at? Because I think that one could be really problematic for us.
The that was just talked about in the news yesterday. I don't know if it's.
Yeah, it would allow anybody who wants to create a micro school in their home, and basically the city wouldn't be allowed to regulate that in any way, which we had this issue a couple of years ago with daycares and preschools.
Do you remember what bill that was? I'm following that one.
SB 13, and I thought the league had negotiated it down to like where we could still enforce health safety kind of things like occupancy and stuff, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
it's SB 13?
Education entity amendments, isn't that the right one? SB 13?
Yeah.
We just
'Cause they
had so
second
many
substituted
problems
that.
with when we were trying to talk about preschools and how many kids to allow, and it seems like this doesn't allow us to do very much as far as regulating. You could have 5 of them in Scott's cul-de-sac, all right next door.
So, Mayor, that bill has
passed and is ready to be signed by the governor.
Yeah.
Which one?
No, but they had
The
a
one we were just
second
talking
substitute in that one.
I'm not sure what the substitutes are, but that's where the bill is. So whatever it is, it's.
No, they allowed the public safety. They allowed the public safety on that one. I'll look at it.
Kim, anything else, or Aaron, or Ron, or anyone? So you're bringing up this one, anything else?
Just overall, I just have to say I'm extremely disappointed in our legislature taking away our authority every which way they can. And it just is frustrating to see this with the so-called conservative
Oh,
state.
get ready. They want to take away that we can go get grants in a class 1 or class 2 city.
Good news, Mayor, that one got subbed to where now you just have to be a city anywhere and you can apply for those grants.
Okay, good.
So that.
But I'm
got
shocked at how, I'm just dismayed, I guess is the right word. Was involved 25, 30 years ago, actually 50 years ago, it goes back that far, with the legislature. And we did not have this kind of 800, 900 bills, and all of them seems to be taking away and restricting our rights, especially as a municipality, but also as citizens.
Is there any concerns with HB 465, which is the big housing affordability bill? I know there were a lot of negotiations. Have they been able to get in, because they still have it down as a hot?
I think it's hot because it affects cities quite a bit, but the league has been very involved in that one.
Yeah, that was one that they got way out in front on.
I would love an update from Chief William on this. I think, really to let you guys know where the school safety resource officers one is, because that's going to have a budgetary impact for us.
So I'll be quick. That bill has been out of the House and is sitting in Senate rules right now.
Which bill is it?
This is the school safety amendments. So what this does is require an entity or the school district to employ either a school resource officer, a security officer, or what a new term is a school guardian in every school, including high schools, junior highs, middle schools, elementaries, private schools, charter schools, any place that you are teaching students. There's a requirement by this bill to have somebody there that's providing security for the facility or for the campus. This brings in, as the bill is currently written, the school districts are responsible for the hiring and the employment of those individuals. However, it's the onus is upon the sheriffs and local police departments to train them and make sure they're equipped with those tools and training that would be required of security inside a school, which could have far-reaching effects from equipment to time on a firearms range to de-escalation techniques, and it runs the gamut. So there is a pretty big responsibility. As it sits right now, I think we're going to have to employ, not but the school district's going to have to employ 6 or 7 more individuals here in both Highland and Alpine to be able to make this to meet the requirements of this bill. This bill goes into effect May 1st. Well, I'm sorry, May 31st or June 1st, one of the two. Anyway, it needs to be implemented by next school year. So we have a short runway to get this thing up and launched as we move forward. So it's sitting in rules right now. I spoke with Representative Wilcox this afternoon about this bill and Senator Ibsen. They're talking about funding. It has a $6.5 million fiscal note attached to it right now, but all of that is allocated towards upfitting schools and making them compliant, security compliant, having one entrance for the public in and out of the schools.
They want cameras in every classroom. They want panic alert devices.
Did you say that includes charter schools and private schools?
Correct.
Funded by the school district?
Correct. Well,
Does
funded by the charter school would have to be responsible for theirs. The private school would have to be responsible for theirs, and they have to have somebody on campus while school's in session. So that means a backfill also. If that individual is sick, or if they're on vacation, or if they have training they need to go to that's required, you need to backfill and have somebody there
Are you responsible for the training of the charter schools?
We're responsible for the training for any school that meets those definitions in our.
Including charter and private?
Correct, yep.
How do
Wow,
they
the
define?
best training is done in the hiring process, hiring people with the skills
Well,
to begin with.
it's the hiring process, and then there's ongoing training
Yeah.
and then there's equipment that comes along with that. too.
And then Chief Patton, you might want to be aware it changes the International Fire Code. No, it just says that for the building, certain building state emergency communication systems.
In the schools?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it affects you guys.
How do they define a private school? Is that by the number of students they have? Because with micro schools, where you're going to have, if you have 100 kids in a house,
So I know there was a discussion of this, of the count of students or how many students are in a school. I'm not sure that micro schools count, but anything that's considered a charter school or a private school, there needs to be.
it's going to depend on
Yeah,
definition.
there needs to be an individual there that's providing security, so. So there's going to be some costs associated with that. Again, I know they're discussing about upping that fiscal note as we speak, so.
But the fiscal note doesn't include like local entities, cities, municipalities.
No.
It's only LEAs.
Correct. That's to what we would call hardening the target or making it more difficult for people
Yeah.
that want to do harm to get into the schools or penetrate the schools. That includes, bulletproof glass. It includes doors. It includes making sure that there's locking mechanisms or there's a way to lock the school, the classroom from inside the classroom as opposed to outside the classroom. There's a lot that's going on with this particular bill. But none of that money that's in the fiscal note now is going to make it down to us.
Any other bills we need to discuss tonight?
Just very high level, SB 185 talks about third-party inspectors. So this is with
Oh, yes.
building inspectors, where right now, as it sits, the bill says that that we have to allow a builder to hire their own inspector, and we have to accept their report. The league has severe issues with this just because it's taking out that neutrality, right? If the inspector works for the builder, there's some incentive issues there. So there's a couple substitutes in the works that, number one, either if there's some kind of a building code dispute, we do a quick resolution internally on that, which honestly, there's already provisions to be able to do that. But the second one is also that maybe they do it so they can hire a third-party inspector, but it's a random list of inspectors that have already been approved by the state. So they don't necessarily get to choose which one. We're really trying to push for it to only be if we have a 3-day shot clock. If we can't do an inspection within 3 days, we're actually in violation of state code, which actually 99% of cities are compliant with. So we're trying to push for if it gets to over the 3 days, then you can do that.
There's also a provision that if they do this, that there would be a disclaimer saying that buyer beware. This was inspected by the builder's own third-party inspector. I just hope it doesn't pass.
As we talked about open public meetings, there's actually one that's down here as Open Public Meetings Act. Have you followed that one at all, Rob? That's number 36.
I've not.
I just thought it was interesting. We talked about it tonight, and there's actually one of the bills addressing.
Anyway, can I just make a comment? So, as those of you that are following these bills and anything that has to do with the Senate, I can text Senator Kennedy directly, and I can get your worries to him, and he's been a pretty good support. So,
I know, Ron, you brought up about our legislation. I actually feel this legislative session that our House Representative Brammer and Mike Kennedy, our senator, I feel personally have been a little bit more, I can get a hold of them and engage them more.
Yeah.
I understand there's been some concern, but anytime I've reached out, I've gotten responses back, and so I've appreciated that.
But the bills that take our land use authority away, there's just so many of those. It's just not isolated.
Oh, there's a lot of land use bills. I agree.
There's-
It'll be
and
interesting to
it's
see which
just-
ones pass.
It just shocks me. I'm just so disappointed.
Kim, this is the week where bills also, there'll be a magic bill pop up.
Mhm.
Are you hearing about any magic bills, or Aaron,
Yes.
are we hearing about magic bills out there?
There are magic bills out there, yes.
And do you know, are they going to affect us?
No, they will not.
I just, just if there's a little word of the little birdie, also there's going to be a magic bill also pops. So. Okay.
I know.
If not, so let's look through our future meetings. So tomorrow night, we have our 4800 West meeting. Just out of curiosity, council members, who anticipates being here tomorrow night? Just like kind of.
Do we need?
Okay, so two.
I
we
will
have
be here.
3?
You will be?
I will be.
Okay, so they will be 3. We have a public meeting notice, right?
This has already been noticed for a notice of quorum.
It's
so
already
you're
been
fine.
noticed.
We
You
had
can
notice
all
of
come.
meeting.
Actually, I have a conflict. I have library board training tomorrow night.
Okay.
So
So
I
maybe
believe
I'll
that
be
makes
there also. We're starting, it's at 7.
7.
Okay.
And it's going to be 1 hour, right?
I'll be here.
You
Well,
said
no,
you
I
will be?
don't. That's
I'll be
on-
here for 30 minutes. Yes.
Okay, so we will.
Library board training.
Well, I anticipate the notices went out. We have a specific packet for, we believe there's 23 homes that could possibly be affected by this. And they have a specific packet that's specific to their home that will try to get them some answers. This meeting is really for those 23 residents. So if we have it fill up here tomorrow night, you'll notice the meeting's focusing, right, Andy? We're focusing on these 23 residents. There might be others here that want to kind of chime in, but we're focused on those that might be affected as we're looking at the road specifically. That's what the neighborhood meeting. It's not a public meeting for them. There's planning commission that will be on the 28th, which will have the 4800 West on their discussion. The 4800 West. Now you have down March 5th here. Is that a correct date?
No, that's now March 12th. I think we must
So
have.
we do
March
not have
5th is caucus.
Yeah, so caucus night is March 5th. Encourage you all to go. This is the national elections. There's a lot of stuff going on countywide. There's some things that's going to kind of matter how we get in there. I'm just saying that it's a good one to kind of engage because there's a lot going on. Then we have on March 12th, so not the 5th, March 12th is our next city council meeting. And then we have public safety for those on March 13th. And then we have our next city council meeting on the 19th. Anything else, Aaron, or anything else needs to come before?
I don't think so, Mr. Mayor.
Anything else from the council? I'll take a motion then.
So moved.
Second. Okay, I have a move to close in our meeting from Scott. It's second by Ron. All in favor?
Aye.
We are now adjourned.